As such, he needed to prepare and think about a lot of things. Easy Media was definitely the most reputable entertainment company. If they could buy it, it would be very helpful to the entertainment group section of Jasper's plan. This was why Jasper had never considered buying another company. Although the current Easy Media was far less powerful than in his previous life before he was reborn, it already had a rudimentary form and held a lot of contracts with celebrities who would be popular in the next 2 years. This alone was a huge hidden wealth. If he considered another company, Jasper would need to spend 10 times or even 100 times more effort and capital in order to achieve what Easy Media had now. Therefore, Jasper had made plans. If Easy Media was really not available, he would directly expand Advent Entertainment Group in Harbor City and use Harbor City as a springboard to directly enter the market in mainland. However, he still needed to think and carefully weigh his decision regarding this. Otherwise, if he made a mistake, he would lose everything. The core business district was near Workers' Stadium in Swallow Capital. It had always been a paradise for the hedonistic sons of Swallow Capital's rich families to eat, drink, and have fun. There was a small shop where one could drink for $100,000, and there was also a high-end club with bottles of wine selling for $100,000 each. Here, the luxury cars and beautiful women were the most indispensable, as well as sons from rich families. In a high-end clubhouse without a sign, a group of men and women were huddled together. They were chatting in the innermost private room. After the door of the private room was pushed open, a sturdy and impressive-looking young man in a white suit walked in. He looked very handsome. The only flaw was his hooked nose that destroyed his face with a sunny disposition, making him look sinister and vicious. "Mr. Coombe? Mr. Coombe?" The moment he came in, everyone in the room greeted him respectfully. Hector Coombe nodded and took out a cigarette to dangle it between his lips. A nearby young man quickly took out his lighter to light up the cigarette for him. "Mr. Coombe, that middleman named George has been waiting for you for quite some time now. He said he has something important to tell you." Hector lifted his eyebrow and said nonchalantly, "I asked him to do something, and he's taking his sweet time, yet he's always running to me to take the credit for other people's achievements. Let him come in." After a while, George walked in from outside. He needed to nod, bend down, and smile whenever he saw someone. When George saw Hector, he bent down and walked at a faster pace. He got in front of Hector and called out respectfully, "Hello, Mr. Coombe." Hector glanced at George and said, "You have a wound on your face. Did you get into a fight?" George's sadness came pouring out of him as he said with a bitter expression, "Mr. Coombe, you have to stand up for me." Hector said in annoyance, "What do I have to do with you getting beaten up? What do you mean by standing up for you?" George said, "You have no idea. I ran into Jim Yap today, and coincidentally, the person who entrusted Jim to steal Easy Media from you was there too. He's a young man who looks like he's in his 20s. He even had a bodyguard with him. He was insufferably arrogant, like he was above the law and natural morality." George tried to make himself look pitiful and kept adding in details as he said, "I ran into them, so I planned to scout out some information. However, after a while, that person named Jasper Lane started yelling at me. I said I'm working for Mr. Coombe, but I guess it would have been better if I didn't tell him, because after I said your name, Jasper became even more arrogant. He said you should go talk to him yourself if you have the balls. He said you have such an exaggerated opinion of your ability for fighting over Easy Media with him." George carefully glanced at Hector's face and realized that the man was without an expression. As such, he continued, "How would I be able to endure listening to that? So, I fought back, but before I could even say anything, he asked his bodyguard to hit me until I became like this." After telling the story with some additional details, George tried hard to make himself appear as a poor man who got beaten up just because he stood up for Hector. After he said that, Hector laughed. He leaned against the sofa, and his fingers were fiddling with the cigarette. He said to George, "Are you done?" George nodded and answered vigilantly, "I'm done." Hector then violently slapped George across the face and roared, "You're a king piece of trash." His sudden roar that came without a warning sign shocked everyone in the room. Everyone turned around to look at them bewilderedly. Then they looked at George, who was holding his face with pain and grievance with pity in their eyes. They shook their heads at the same time. Mr. Coombe was hot-tempered and arrogant. This was not the first time he hit someone without any warning signs. You said you're working for me, and those people named Jasper and Jim hit you. It means they're indirectly slapping me across the face. And you just came back after getting King beaten up? How do you even have the guts to come back? Hector grabbed George's collar with sinister eyes. Don't you know how to get a few people to kill him? George trembled as he looked into Hector's icy gaze. He said with a shaky voice, Mr. Coombe, I was wrong. You good for nothing. Hector pushed George away, and his eyes were twinkling with an icy glint. Jasper Lane? I've never heard about this rat before, and he dares to fight over this with me? How ballsy! After he said that, Hector took out his phone to make a call, with a gloomy look on his face. After a while, the call went through. Mr. Coombe, is there anything I can help you with? Jim's neither obsequious nor supercilious voice sounded from the other end. Hector smiled sinisterly and said coldly, I don't care who you or that son of a T Jasper are, but if you want to fight against me in Swallow Capital, you need to know your place. Today, I'm having dinner with Easy Media. Don't you guys want to buy Easy Media as well? All right, don't say that I'm not giving that son of a TCH a chance. Ask him to show up if he has the guts. In Swallow Capital, nobody dares to fight me for what I want. Tell that son of a TCH what I said. If he has the balls to show up tonight, I'll respect him for being an honorable man before I kill him. If he doesn't have the guts to do so, then I'll kill him directly. On the other end of the phone, Jim had a complicated look on his face after he hung up. How would he not know that this was a banquet set up to attack a guest? However, this was the chance for them to meet the King brothers. He had to tell Jasper no matter if he was going or not. As such, he immediately called Jasper and told him about Mr. Coombe's phone call. Jasper, this is a trap. While listening to Jim talking on the phone, Jasper stood in his hotel room while facing the bustling night view of Swallow Capital. His face looked as calm as water. I'll go. Jasper only said these two words. Jim's words were all stuck in his throat after Jasper's two words. He could not speak after a very long time. Jasper, have you thought about this? This is a dinner with a dangerous agenda, not an ordinary dinner. It's obvious that Hector wants to do something bad to you tonight. I'm afraid it's going to be troublesome. Don't be impulsive, because you're being blinded by anger. Jim was still trying to talk him out of this. Jasper said flatly, Uncle Yap, I'm not going because of my so-called dignity, but if we don't go tonight because of this, the King brothers might think we've given up. Hector would then be able to get Easy Media without lifting a finger. Jim heard that and sighed. He said, Jasper, to be honest, I suggest that you look for another company. You won't be able to buy Easy Media so easily. Hector is not that easily defeated. Jasper chuckled and said, Uncle Yap, give me the address. I'll go alone. Jim said angrily after he heard that. What are you talking about? Do you think I'm afraid of death? Uncle Yap, this is my business. I don't need to involve you in this for no good reason, Jasper said. Jim said in a deep voice, Enough. I've already been involved right from the start. How will I be able to face other people if I run away the moment we're faced with danger? Wait for me at the hotel. I'll drive over and pick you up. After Jim said that, he hung up the phone. Half an hour later, Jasper got into Jim's Audi. After getting into this high-end Audi, Jasper laughed and said, Uncle Yap, I guess you made quite a lot of money these few years. Are you mocking me? Jim glared unhappily at Jasper and said, Compared to you and Dawson, what my consultant agency makes is just pocket money to you too. Jasper smiled and said, We're making money, but Uncle Yap, you're making connections. You may not be able to do a lot of things with money, but it's easy with connections. Jim smiled and said, Do you know about consultant agencies? Jasper said after shrugging, I know a little bit. The two chatted, and after about an hour, they arrived at the place where Hector and the King brothers had arranged to have dinner together. The Prince Mansion? This place was not a star-rated hotel, nor a well-known restaurant, but a private guild with the characteristics of Swallow Capital. Looking at the tall vermilion gate in front of him and the large stone lions sitting on both sides of the door, for the first time ever, Jasper felt the difference between the life of the upper class in Swallow Capital and other cities. If one were to say that the gentries in Harbor City were mostly known for indulging in a life of modern luxury, then at Swallow Capital, there was a solid foundation here. At least, modern metropolises such as Harbor City and Waterhoof City certainly did not have places like Prince Mansion. At the end of the 16th century, this was the old house of a Scandinavian prince. Hagen was his last name. It was originally a tourist attraction, but was later bought by a businessman with an extensive background to build a private guild. Jim was very familiar with this place, and his tone sounded inexplicably complicated. In Swallow Capital, it's not uncommon to be able to go to a hotel to eat a meal worth tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. However, it's true power when one can enter such a place. The chef here worked in the kitchen of a palace before, and he's not open to the public. Only naturalized members can come in. The annual fee for a membership card in this place is 1 million summer dollars. And yet it's still an ordinary card of the lowest level. Jasper asked, "Do you fit the requirements to be a member here?" Jim quickly chuckled and said, "You think too highly of me. How would I fit the requirements? If you want to join as a member in this place, 1 million is just a base fee. The most important thing is that you need to have an invitation from a member who's in the middle level or above before you can enter. With your father-in-law's assets, he only can barely join as the lowest ranking member if he's not in another city but in Swallow Capital. You have to know that if you're in another city and you have $1 billion summer dollars worth of assets, it's a different concept from if you're in Swallow Capital. A billionaire in Swallow Capital has resources and connections that people in other cities can't match." Jasper understood. In his previous life, there were a lot of rumors about the various clubs and clubhouses for the rich and powerful among the upper class in the country. For example, there was Club Tarzan in the business circle. Wayne, Hudson, and Warwick's chairman at that time were all members. Club Gelb was another supercilious club. Most of their members were from Swallow Capital residents. It could be said that it was where the bigwigs gathered. Jasper remembered that Henry was a top diamond member in Club Gelb and held a very high rank. After they stepped into the door, the place was decorated like a classic courtyard of a mansion in Swallow Capital. A staff member came up to them to politely ask if they had a reservation or a member card. Jim mentioned Hector's name and said they were invited here. The staff then led the two of them into the inner courtyard. The winding corridor was circuitous, leading them to a secluded and quiet place. Aside from Prince Mansion's historical and cultural value, its floor area in the main district of Swallow Capital was enough to give it an astronomical price. If one could make this place a private guild, then one could only imagine how powerful the boss behind it was. Jasper and Jim pushed the door open and walked in after they were brought to a small separated courtyard. The courtyard was deep. In this extravagant courtyard, the scenery was refined, and there was also meticulously decorated greenery. Under the sky roof in the middle, there was an interesting and appealing round table. Hector was sitting in the main seat, and on his left, there were two middle-aged men in their 40s who looked kind of similar. On his right, it was George, whom they had met before. He was carefully sitting on the stool with just half of his buttocks as he laughed along with Hector. Jasper's eyes scanned past the King brothers and George before finally landing on Hector. On the other hand, Hector was also looking at him up and down. When George saw Jasper, his eyes went red. He suppressed his anger and hatred to say to Hector, "Mr. Coombe, that's Jasper." Hector glared coldly at George and said, "I'm not blind." George nodded and bowed to agree with him. Then, he turned around to look at Jasper with rancor in his eyes. George laughed malevolently and said to Jasper, "I thought you wouldn't have the balls to come." "Not bad, you're pretty ballsy," Jasper said calmly. "I'm doing legal business in the capital and didn't do anything to violate the law. So why would I be afraid to go anywhere?" Jasper peered at Hector, who was sitting at one side. He knew he was the young master of the Combs. He chuckled lightly at George, saying, "I said that you're a hired thug, and you didn't admit it. From the looks of it now, you have no choice but to admit it. You!" George's face was flushed red, but he did not dare to do anything impulsive. He quickly turned around to look at Hector. "Mr. Coombe, it's this guy. Not only is he disregarding you, but he even wants to steal easy media from you." After he said that, George looked at Jasper with a pleased look on his face because he knew that after this, Hector might crush Jasper under his foot. What did it matter if Jasper had the strength? Mr. Coombe was the local young master of Swallow Capital. He could crush Jasper under his foot at any minute. After Hector heard this, he scoffed. He looked at Jasper and said, "Since you know he's my hired thug, then you should also know you need to see who the dog's owner is before you hit it. I don't care that. You beat George up, but you still dared to beat him up even after he said my name. That means you're disrespecting me." Hector picked up a wet tissue to wipe his hands. His eyes looked sinister as he said gloomily, "And anyone who disrespects me in Swallow Capital will pay a terrible price." Hector's arrogance and audacious character caused Jim and the King brothers, who were silent the entire time, to have subtle changes in their expressions. Jasper was the only one looking nonchalant. "Of course, I won't bite back at a mad dog that wants to bite me. Instead, I'll kick a few of its teeth away. As for how the owner feels, you're the one who didn't tie him up properly, so I just kicked him. King Bullsh T." George was livid. He stood up suddenly and pointed at Jasper before roaring, "Who do you think you are? You keep repeating the word mad dog. Who are you calling a mad dog?" "The one with the biggest reaction," Jasper said insipidly. George felt his breathing become hitched as he stared fixedly at Jasper. He chuckled coldly and said, "You're still so arrogant now that you're here. You're really heedless of consequences. Do you know where this is? Do you know that people like you will never be able to eat here if it isn't for Mr. Coombe? Do you know how big of a disparity you have with Mr. Coombe? You're just a person with limited vision. Don't think you're at the top of the world just because you have some coins. There are more people better than you in this world. There are no disadvantages to going out to see the world to gain more experience." George had a pleased look on his malevolent face. He displayed a look as if he was towering above everyone while he looked askance at Jasper. "Mr. Coombe was right. You're just an idiot. Mr. Coombe is the one who's so generous in giving you a chance to see him. If it were up to me, I'd just crush you to death with a flick of my wrist. Do you even think you're worthy of speaking to Mr. Coombe?" Hector had a satisfied look on his face while he listened to what George said. Why did he need a hired thug like George? It was to speak on behalf of him when he was in situations where he was unable to. It was obvious that he felt amazing after George kept sucking up to him. Jasper sighed and said, "It's rare to see someone feeling so superior as a dog." George was pleased, but in the next second his expression froze. The changes in his expression looked very interesting. "You little b*****, what did you say?" George's face looked so malevolent it was scary. He wanted so badly to swallow Jasper whole. "Did you not hear Jasper calling you a dog?" Jim smirked and said, "As someone in the same industry as you, this is the first time you're making me feel so king embarrassed to be in this industry. Look at your spineless self. You want so badly to lie on the floor and lick Hector's shoes clean, right?" What Jim said almost caused George's lungs to explode from anger. He looked at Jim with bitter resentment and roared wildly, "What are you so pleased about? Is it your turn to speak?" "Enough," Hector said insipidly. He looked at Jasper and Jim with an astonished look in his eyes. He said, "Don't ask for a mile when we've already given you an inch. This is Swallow Capital. Do you understand? Mr. Coombe, Mr. Lane, since we're here to talk business, why don't we get into the topic?" One of the King brothers, Leo King, said awkwardly to help to resolve the dispute. To be honest, he really did not want to get between them. At this moment, he was secretly feeling remorseful for waiting for a better offer. If they knew Hector would be so demanding, then they should have just immediately sold it. For now, it would be very difficult for him to get away from this situation. He could not afford to offend Hector, and he did not want to know who Jasper was anymore, because from what he could see right now, Jasper was definitely not Hector's rival. That was why he did not even consider getting in contact with Jasper. He even made the decision that if Hector did not cut the price down too low, he would just sell the company. Leo was thinking this while bracing himself as he saw that the two of them were already in a state of mutual hostility. It was none of his business if these two fought to their deaths, but since he was here, he would be undoubtedly involved in it too. Leo could not afford to provoke these men. Hector laughed at Leo's statement and said, "Right, we don't want word about this to go out and have people call me petty for not allowing someone to eat." After he said that, Hector waved his hand. "Serve the food." The servers quickly brought out all kinds of food. They all smelled, looked, and tasted great. It would be difficult for them to find such food elsewhere. However, no one at the table had the appetite to eat. Hector said, I'm determined to get easy media, so please, Mr. Kings, give me a good price. Leo and his brother, Noah King, looked at each other. They had already thought of a price on their way here. 500 million. To be honest, the maximum market price for easy media right now was approximately 400 million. By asking for 500 million, they were giving themselves a huge leeway. However, Hector frowned and was dissatisfied to hear the price. He expected to take down easy media with 200 million. Even though he was one of the members of the residence and his family was pretty powerful, when it came to money, he did not have that much. His family would only be able to handle 200 million. However, Hector did not care. He was clear that the King brothers were not idiots. As long as he said something, they had to sell, and even if they did not want to, they would have to sell it to him all the same. Deal. When Hector was about to say something, Jasper's one word shocked everyone at the table. His clear and sonorous voice was filled with unquestionable certainty. Everyone looked over, their eyes all on Jasper. Jasper looked calm and was even in the mood to enjoy some duck breast. Yes, the food cooked by a chef who previously worked in a palace was indeed amazing. At this moment, Leo, who just proposed the price, saw Hector's face getting darker and darker. He looked as if he was going to explode at any second, and at the same time, he looked as if he was going to start crying internally as well. Damn it, my asking price is obviously fake. Jasper, do you have too much money that it's starting to burn a hole in your pocket? Jasper was willing to spend 500 million to buy easy media, and of course, Leo did not have any opinions about that. However, Hector was still here, and if he were to reach a deal with Jasper, this would not be a matter of 500 million. Mr. Lane, Jasper immediately interrupted Leo and said with a raised eyebrow, "Didn't you just say 500 million, Mr. King? I think this price is very reasonable, so I can make a deal with you right now. We can sign the contract now, and I can transfer the money to you immediately." To be honest, this was the most straightforward business transaction Leo had done in his 40 years of living. If Hector was not sitting here, he wanted so badly to hug Jasper and kiss him a few times. However, he only wanted to stand up and run away now. He did not dare to offend Hector. With a loud slam, Hector slammed his fork on the table and looked at Jasper with dark eyes. He said frigidly, "Lane, are you sure you want to fight me over this?" After slowly taking a sip of the lobster bisque, Jasper did not even raise his head before saying insipidly, "Since we're doing business, of course, there will be buying and selling. Mr. King proposed a price, and I'm willing to pay it. What's the problem with that? Mr. Coombe, if you're not happy, you can compete with me. Just name your price." After he said that, Jasper smiled and turned around to look at Jim, who was feeling excited. "Uncle Yap, the lobster bisque tastes pretty good. It's thick and creamy, but not greasy. Do you want some?" Jim looked seriously at Jasper. He felt like he could not see through this young man anymore. He was unflustered, and there was an air of arrogance emitting from his ordinary, modest self. Compared to a hedonistic son of rich parents like Hector, Jasper was ranked much higher. In comparison to Jasper, he was scared of Hector's background, and thus was fearful in everything he did when faced with the man. He did not dare to fight the world when he was impoverished anymore. Jim guffawed boldly and picked up the bowl. He laughed and said, "All right, let me try the food from this chef who has worked in a palace before," Jim said as he took some bisque for himself. However, at this moment, Hector, who had been ignored and suppressed this whole time, could not stand it anymore. He stood up suddenly and lifted his hand to turn the table over. With a loud whoosh, everything on the table was scattered to the floor. The bisque and sauces were all over the place, and the scene was a mess. Hector stood at the side of the table that had been pushed over and said sinisterly, "If you don't give me an easy time, then none of you will have an easy time too. Do you really think you could take down easy media just because you have money?" While he said that, Hector looked gloomily at the King brothers, who were petrified. He pointed at Jasper and said, "You too. Think properly. Are you sure you want to sell him the company?" Leo and Noah looked at each other as beads of cold sweat started to pour down their faces. "Mr. Coombe, Mr. Lane is too straightforward, and we didn't think." "Stop ting." Hector interrupted the brothers roughly. He turned around to look at Jasper and said frigidly, "Jasper, I'll say this now. If you insist on fighting me, then it means you're determined to fight with me until death. Jasper stood up too. He said indifferently, Mr. Coombe, it's no use depending on the status of the elders in your family to buy something. It's either you take out the money or you leave. I'm taking out 500 million. What about you? Jim almost burst out laughing after he heard Jasper saying this. Even though Hector had a powerful background, Jim felt extremely pleased right now when he saw Jasper pressuring Hector with his large amount of capital. Hector was on the brink of exploding from anger, but could not say anything. Hector was indeed stronger than Jasper in terms of background and resources. However, if they were going to compete in terms of money, he was not Jasper's rival at all. When Jasper was reborn, the market price for Easy Media was 11.5 billion. As such, this price right now was very low. Since Jasper had 7 billion in cash right now, he did not care whether Easy Media was selling for 500 million or 6 billion. Hector glared at the King brothers. Indeed, those two brothers were still mortified. However, they seemed to be siding with Jasper from the look in their eyes. After all, Hector had disclosed the price before, and he said he would only be able to pay 200 million at most. There was a 300 million price difference now. This was such a big difference that was enough for the King brothers to resist their fear against Hector's power. They could take the money and bail. Even if Hector is all that, will he follow us out of the country? Leo and Noah looked at each other at the same time with the same idea in their hearts. Money has been able to move someone since ancient times. This was what it meant. You may have the riches, but I'm worried that you won't have the life to enjoy it. Hector said coldly. Jasper lifted his gaze to look into Hector's eyes. He laughed and said, Could it be that you, Mr. Coombe, are able to conquer the world with just one hand? Hector chuckled coldly and said, I'm giving you another chance. Take back your asking price. 200 million. Leo, Noah, think it through. The last sentence was obviously directed at the King brothers. Leo and Noah looked at each other before looking carefully at Jasper. This subconscious move angered Hector so much that he wanted to hit someone. Jasper smiled indifferently and said, Mr. Leo, Mr. Noah, I won't take back my offer price. I'll buy it for 500 million. You should think about who you want to sell it to. This was the first time Hector felt so infuriated after looking at the King brothers falling into a dilemma. This was already something in the bag, but he did not expect Jasper to hurt him with his capital. Now, Jasper was brazenly attacking him with his money, just like how he usually used his power and background to make people bow down to him. The King brothers said 500 million. Then, fine, 500 million. Jasper would buy it. However, what could Hector do? He was not able to take out 500 million. 200 million was already his absolute limit. He always depended on his power and background. Hector was always successful in every endeavor, and this was the first time he realized how poor he was. When he thought about this, Hector felt his blood rushing to his brain. The way he stared at Jasper was as sinister and savage as a venomous snake. Jasper, even if you buy Easy Media, aren't you worried that I'll ask every industry to shut your company out? When he said this, Hector smirked and said, When that happens, every celebrity in Easy Media won't be allowed to take on any commercials nor make any albums. As long as it's a movie or a TV series from your company, they will never be able to premiere in this life. Jasper smiled when he was faced with Hector's threats. He said, What big words, Mr. Coombe. Since you're saying this, then I shall tell you something in advance as well, Mr. Coombe. In the future, after I buy Easy Media, I'll integrate all of the industries as fast as I can. When that happens, any entertainment company under your name will be on Easy Media's blacklist. You're shutting me out? Then I'll do the same to you. Don't you even think about working with Easy Media. I want to see if I'm the one who can bear the loss, or if you're the one who can handle this, Mr. Coombe. Hector clenched his fists tightly after listening to what Jasper said. His teeth were making cracking sounds from him gritting them too hard. He never had such intense intention to kill someone. However, he knew if Jasper was able to take out 500 million to buy Easy Media without even blinking, then he really had the money to go head-on with him. If that happened, he would be in much bigger trouble. You won't dare. Hector roared. No, I will. Jasper nodded calmly. Hector laughed sinisterly and said, All right, perfect. He turned around and glared frigidly at the King brothers. Hector said emotionlessly, Are you selling to Jasper or me? Leo swallowed his saliva and said challengingly, Mr. Coombe, there's such a huge price difference. Why don't you increase it a little? Hector's face twitched. He looked at Jasper with bitter resentment. He was planning to borrow some from his older brother later. He might be able to get 10 million. 250 million, Hector said through gritted teeth. This was already his limit. After calling out this price, he was already prepared to get berated by his brother, Jacob Coombe, when he went home. Leo and Noah looked at each other again. They were born in Swallow Capital. If this was not the last resort, they would not want to move the whole family abroad too. Then, at this critical moment, Jasper spoke. 600 million. Hector sucked in a deep breath. He was enraged, but at the same time, he was shocked as well. Also, there was a hint of envy and greed that he did not want to admit. He did not expect Jasper to be so rich and imposing. He had gritted his teeth and could only take out an extra 50 million. This was already his limit. However, Jasper increased his offer price by another 100 million without even batting an eyelid. How would he be able to compete with that? Those insipid 2 words were like the last straw to the King brothers' final line of defense. Now, the scale in the brothers' hearts was completely leaning toward Jasper. Mr. Lane, let's sign the contract. Our requirement is an immediate transfer of the money. Leo gritted his teeth and did not dare to look at Hector's extremely dark face as he said to Jasper. Jasper smiled lightly and looked at Hector. He said, I guess you're embarrassingly short of money now. Huh, Mr. Coombe? How unfortunate. The one thing I do not lack is money. Jasper shrugged and took out his checkbook to write a check directly. He then ripped it out and handed it to Leo. He said flatly, a 600 million check from Commercial Bank. You can cash out at any time. You got balls. Hector's eyes were red as he watched Leo and Noah taking the check happily. He felt as if his face was swollen after getting slapped by Jasper. He growled and roared. Kid, don't forget where this place is. So what if you have some coins? I can have *King squander all of your money. Oh, you can't win, so you're threatening me? I want to see how you're going to squander my money. Jasper took the transfer of shares contract from Jim and handed it to the King brothers before saying flatly, Now, Easy Media belongs to me. After that, Jasper lifted his head to look at Hector. There was a cold glint in his eyes. Mr. Coombe, not only do I have balls, but I also have money. Crack, crack, crack. That was the sound of Hector grinding his teeth. He was standing there feeling like a shabby and poor idiot. Jasper kept on mocking him for having no money. The most infuriating thing was that Hector indeed had no money. At least he was unable to compete with Jasper. Hector was filled with extreme grief and indignation while looking angrily as the King brothers signed the contract happily. He felt extremely horrible right now. Now, this matter was basically irreversible. Everything was set in stone now. Currently, Easy Media belonged to Jasper based on legal principles. Meanwhile, Hector Coombe was just a buffoon. This was the first time Hector felt so angry and aggrieved in his 30 years of living. If this was before, he would never let this go so easily. However, Hector was not an idiot. The King brothers were unable to reject the price Jasper was offering this time. He was not able to get the effect he wanted by threatening the King brothers while there was such a huge enticement in front of them. He was unable to snatch it over forcefully as well because the King brothers were not to be reckoned with. Even though they did not want to offend the Combs, Jasper's price was enough for them to escape to faraway places. Hector took a deep breath and looked coldly at Jasper. He said, All right, I want to see whether this Easy Media that you bought for 600 million will be able to flourish. Maybe it'll need to switch its allegiance to a new patron after a few days. Hector already had a plan to teach Jasper a lesson. He was going to let Jasper buy Easy Media and then give it to him obediently. When he thought about this, a smirk was seen on the corners of Hector's lips. Swallow Capital was never a place to compete over who had the most money. Hector would not turn back now. George was trembling at one side, and he quickly stood up. He wanted to leave with Hector, but someone stopped him. Mr. Powell, Jasper said dully. George's body froze. I plan to invest in Uncle Yap's commercial consultant agency. Your company will be our first target. George felt his heart racing. He stole a glance at Hector, but the latter only stopped in his tracks for a few seconds before walking away without turning back. At this moment, George had given up all hope. He knew Jasper was going to do something to him now. However, his biggest support, Hector, had already walked away. How would he care whether he lived or died? Jasper, don't be such an intolerable bully, George said furiously. He had been operating in Swallow Capital for more than 10 years, and all of his belongings were in this company. How would he be willing to give it up? This is just business competition. It's such a normal thing. How am I bullying you? Jasper said calmly. George's expression changed as his lips trembled. He did not dare to say anything anymore. He knew that Jasper was a man of his words. Judging from him buying Easy Media with $600 million without even batting an eyelid, he would be able to crush him as easily as crushing an ant. If Hector was going to ignore him, then how would he be Jasper's rival? George fell into a deep state of despair. Mr. Lane, please have mercy. I'll never go against you anymore, George begged while sobbing. Jasper looked indifferently at George. Suddenly, he smiled at Jim and said, Uncle Yap, how much do you think George's company is worth? Jim was slightly dazed. Before this, Jasper had never discussed it with him. However, currently he had to cooperate with Jasper. Jim smiled and thought properly before saying, back then, it might have been worth 7 or 8 million, but the current market situation now is not that great and it's difficult to have any business. So, I'm guessing 2 million max? After George heard that, he was livid. He yelled, nonsense. My clientele alone is not even worth this price. Jasper said indifferently, if Uncle Yap said 2 million, then 2 million it is. You can sell it to me for 2 million, or you can fight with us. George's face immediately went white while his heart bled. If they bought his company for 2 million, the loss he suffered would be enough to make him bleed internally. However, George realized he could not say no. If he declined, his company might get destroyed by Jim. He was never Jim's rival even back then. What more after Jasper's injection of funds? After taking a deep breath, George smiled bitterly and said, okay, 2 million it is. I'm selling. That was the price just now. Now it's 1.5 million, Jim said suddenly. George was staring at him blankly after hearing that. He subconsciously wanted to scream, but when he saw Jim and Jasper's cold gazes, he came back to his senses. These two were setting a trap for him to walk into. If he said another word, he might only be left with 1 million. He clenched his fists and said through gritted teeth, okay. At this moment, George felt extremely remorseful. He should have never provoked Jasper. After tearing a check of 1.5 million, Jasper handed it to Jim and smiled. He said, Uncle Yap, we'll just treat this 1.5 million as an introduction fee. Jim did not expect Jasper to be serious. He quickly said, Jasper, this is too much. While he was saying that, he saw the glint in Jasper's eyes and quickly stopped talking. He smiled in relief and took the check. He said, all right, if you need anything in the future, just let me know. With the check in his hands, Jim knew this introduction fee was not just a simple 1.5 million summer dollars. Instead, he was gifting him George's entire company. Jim's ability would skyrocket immediately. He would be considered as one of the top companies in the commercial consulting industry in Swallow Capital. Was this not what he dreamed of? Compared to a cash prize of 1.5 million, George's company was the true gift. If Jasper had not threatened George, the man would never have sold his company. Now, everything was only to be expected. This young man was so amazing. Jasper looked at the King brothers and said, Mr. Leo, Mr. Noah, what are your plans now? Leo smiled bitterly and said, we'll stay in Swallow Capital for these 2 days. After completing the procedures with you, we might leave Swallow Capital for the time being. We'll only think about the future when the future comes. Jasper nodded. He understood the fear that the King brothers had for Hector. That's good. Hector won't let this go so easily, Jasper said indifferently. Noah only sat at one side and had not said much this entire time. He hesitated for a while before saying to Jasper, Mr. Lane, I should advise you that even though Hector is very difficult to deal with, his brother Jacob is an even more difficult person to deal with. Hector has suffered such a huge loss this time, so he won't give up so easily. It'll be even more troublesome if Jacob decides to show his face. So, Mr. Lane, if you have any connections now, you should get in contact with them to make preparations. At this moment, Hector had already walked out of Prince Mansion. He got into the car and called a number. Jacob, I want to kill someone named Jasper Lane. After Hector recounted the entire situation, he voiced out his plan. There was silence on the other end of the phone. Then, a calm voice sounded. How many times have I told you not to act so rashly when you encounter something? Come home now, and we'll talk about the details later. I'm going home now. I have to kill him no matter what, Hector said with a sinister look on his face. Don't worry, I won't allow you to be wronged. No matter who that is, we'll break their grubby paws if they disrespect the Combs and swallow capital and dare to steal out profits from us. After Hector got his brother's promise, the sinister look on his face turned into gloominess. He hung up the phone and drove home immediately. In 2 days, the King brothers completed the transfer of ownership of the company to Jasper as quickly as they could. After the final procedure, the King brothers did not have time to exchange courtesies before turning around to take their wives and kids overseas. Perhaps they were going to see how things were going to develop. If Jasper was able to handle Hector's revenge, then they might come back. If he could not, then they might never come back. Jasper did not have any opinions about this. Even though the King brothers had also proved themselves to be strong talents in the future entertainment industry, at this critical moment, they would not stay in the company to help him. Jasper would just find someone else to help him. As long as you had money in this world, there would be more than enough talented people willing to work for you. In these 2 days, Hudson and the gang went back to Cavern City while Jasper was intensively integrating the higher-ups of Easy Media. Easy Media was much easier to handle than Senna. After all, the King brothers already had the intention to sell the company, so the higher-ups were prepared for the news. Therefore, they were willing to continue working for Jasper. Jasper did not hastily rearrange the duties of the leaders in Easy Media. He was not familiar with the abilities and personalities of these people, so he planned to observe them for a while. At this moment, a plane was slowly descending in Swallow Capital International Airport. Henry leaped out of the plane. He stretched and took a deep breath. He looked touched as he said, "The air out here is so much better. I was going to suffocate on that flight." Behind Henry was Anna, wearing a bright red dress and looking devastatingly beautiful. Anna put on her sunglasses to block out the glare from the sun and looked at Henry, who was jumping about. She said solemnly, "We had an agreement. We'll only stay here for 3 days." Henry said unhappily, I got it. Aren't you tired from nagging throughout this entire trip? The reason we came to Swallow Capital is that this is the first time the old man asked me to handle a serious matter. Plus, it's a gigantic project for the Olympic Village, so I have to settle this for him no matter what. Anna looked at Henry's high-spirited behavior and cracked down on him. She said, "This time, Dad asked you here to discuss this tentative. Now that Swallow Capital has successfully applied for the Olympics, the construction for the Olympic Village is still on paper. How much impact do you think you can have?" Henry said while feeling pissed, "That's why I need to show my ability. I know you can't wait to run over to give Jasper a surprise." Okay, stop glaring at me with your eyes. Do you think the old man? And I don't know why you insisted on coming along this time. After we're done with this, we'll go look for Jasper immediately and surprise him. Okay? Anna huffed. She did not want to waste her breath talking to Henry anymore. She turned around and walked out of the airport. Henry yawned and followed behind Anna lazily. He was walking while dragging his feet, looking even more hedonistic than the most hedonistic person in Swallow Capital. After the siblings walked out of the airport, there were already people waiting for them as they had received the news. A tall young man with a unique temperament spotted the siblings after they walked out of the tunnel. His eyes lit up, and he quickly brought his younger brother who was standing next to him over. "Hello, Mr. Law. I'm Jacob Coombe, and I'm one of the Combs who contacted you before." Jacob walked in front of Henry respectfully and bowed carefully before saying. Henry was the eldest grandson whose father was also the eldest son of the Law family's 3rd generation. He was the future successor of the Laws. Even though Jacob was also the child of the Coombe family of Swallow City, no matter the entire Coombe family or even Jacob himself, they were not able to compare to Henry. Old Master Law was an exceptionally talented big shot, while old Master Coon was a close second. According to their statuses and identities, Jacob did not even have the qualification to fetch Henry from the airport. However, Jacob was an ambitious man with a meticulous mind. He had paid a pretty heavy price in exchange for a chance like this. He even brought his little brother along. It was so that they could fight for a chance to leave a good impression of themselves in front of Henry. After he greeted Henry, Jacob did not get a reply after a very long while. When he was about to lift his head in curiosity, he heard Henry snort coldly from his nose. "The F***ck you're looking at? I'll kill you if you look at my sister with such a perverted gaze again." Jacob felt his heart racing frantically. He turned around to see his brother Hector, looking infatuatedly and lifelessly at Anna. Jacob's heart almost leaped out of his chest after he saw this. He lifted his hand to slap his brother across the face. "You disappointing moron. Do you think you can look at Miss Law as you wish? Apologize now." Hector had never seen such a terrifying gaze from his brother before. His face turned white from terror, and he did not have time to care about the pain on his face anymore. He quickly lowered his head and apologized sincerely. "I am sorry." Jacob and Hector were shaking all over. They were facing the laws, and if they offended them, they might be done for. Right now, Jacob regretted bringing his disappointing brother along. He wanted so badly to kick him to death at this moment. Henry smirked. The hedonistic traits in his bones were about to take effect when he heard Anna saying indifferently, "Let's go. We've been on the plane for a few hours, and I'm tired." After Henry heard this, he pressed his lips together, and he did not want to look into this matter anymore. However, it was pretty fun looking at the two ants shaking in fear. Right? Not a lot of mainlanders could be evildoers like Jasper. When Henry thought about his bad experience of being tortured by Jasper until he was shaking in fear, he suddenly felt dull and insipid. "Let's go. Let's go." He waved his hand impatiently and led Anna to walk forward. Behind them, Jacob and Hector both let out sighs of relief at the same time. Jacob then turned his head to glare coldly at Hector. He said icily, "You'd better King watch yourself next time. I don't care how many women you mess with out there, but you need to remember what kind of women you can't touch. Don't you know who Miss Anna Law is? If this happens again, the family and I can't save you." After Hector was done being scolded, he lowered his head deeply and said, "I won't dare to do it again, Jacob. Hurry, let's get these two VIPs to the hotel. I heard Mr. Law is someone who loves having fun as well. Tonight, I'll invite them to have some fun in the club. Think of some ways to get that Jasper person to come as well." After Hector said that, he was stumped for words. He asked, "Are you sure this kind of situation is suitable, Jacobs?" After a cold chuckle, Jacob pointed at Henry's figure in front of him and said, "A big-shot young master like him filters everyone before making friends. If we don't show some of our power and swallow capital, do you think he'll treat us as humans? Don't you have beef with Jasper? Good then, get him over tonight. We'll destroy him in front of Mr. Law, and at the same time, we can show him the power of the combs." Hector's eyes lit up as he lifted his thumb. He said, "Jacob, you're the best. You're killing two birds with one stone." The Coon brothers were still mumbling when they heard Henry's impatient voice from behind them. "Are you limping? Why are you so slow?" The brothers responded and quickly jogged over. They were holding the Law's suitcases and being eagerly attentive. While following behind them, Hector was holding a big suitcase. Even though it was heavy, he was elated. After all, this was Mr. Law's suitcase. Not everyone was allowed to carry his suitcase. His eyes kept shifting mischievously. Hector was thinking about how he was going to humiliate Jasper tonight. "That'll teach you a lesson for being so arrogant, you little idiot. Tonight will be the night you die." When Hector thought about his amazing fantasies, he let out a sinister laugh. He was so elated that he could not wait for tonight to come. Jasper was in his hotel room, looking at the report in his hand that Easy Media had handed over to him. He was thinking about sending this report to Advent Entertainment Group over at Harbor City. After all, they were also in the entertainment industry, so they were experts compared to him. Plus, as for the reorganization of Easy Media, he had to ask for advice from Advent Entertainment Group as well. While Jasper was pondering about this, he received a call from Jim. "Uncle Yap, how is it? Did you get George's company?" Jasper asked with a smile. Jim answered, "Everything is done, and I'm now reorganizing the staff. I owe you big time for this." Jasper got up and poured himself a cup of tea. He said, "Don't be so courteous, Uncle Yap. If I'm helping you, it means I'm helping myself. You have so many ways and information in Swallow Capital. Can you help me contact some headhunting companies? I need some professionals managing the entertainment company for me." Jim said, "No problem. I'll contact you when I have news. However, I just got Hector's call." Jasper lifted his eyebrow slightly. He had been waiting for a few days, but Hector had been quiet this whole time. It did not seem like he was going to do anything, but he had finally appeared now. "He asked us to go to the Hori Stock tonight. I know this place. It's a small clubhouse founded by Hector and the members of the residents. You can eat, drink, and have fun over there. It's kind of like their base. So I don't think anything good is going to happen tonight, since they're asking us over." Jasper said insipidly after hearing what Jim said. "What else did he say?" Jim smiled bitterly and said, "Indeed, I can't hide anything from you. He said if we don't show up, he'll attack my company first and then shut me out. People in my industry will certainly encounter some problems, and we can't handle an inspection. I plan to find a few friends to see whether they'll help me muddle through this." Jasper could understand the bitterness in Jim's words. He said, "Uncle Yap, you don't have to find someone. I don't think your friends will offend the Combs for you. We'll just go." Jim quickly said, "Jasper, this is different from last time. It's more dangerous now. If we go, we'll definitely suffer a loss. We can't go. Uncle Yap, we can't hide from this kind of people. The more we hide, the more they think we're scared and they'll become more intense. The only way to defeat them is to attack them back." Jim was quiet for a while. He gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, I'll listen to you. Let's do it. Worst comes to worst, I'll just close down this company and go back to the province to live off your father-in-law." Jasper laughed and said, "I'll wait for you to come pick me up in the evening." Around evening, Jim drove to the hotel to pick Jasper up. This time, Jasper brought Julian, who had nothing to do as well. On the way there, Jim looked anxious. "Uncle Yap, how did you become friends with my father-in-law? He must have looked down on you." After interacting with each other these few days, the two had become close. As such, Jasper started making jokes with Jim. Jim said unhappily, "I'm the one looking down on him. Who does he think he is to look down on me? You two are completely different people. Uncle Yap, you're too cautious, and it can be said that you're a little timid and overly cautious. However, my father-in-law is bolder than you," Jasper said. Not much needed to be said about Dawson's boldness. If not, he would not have hastily gone into investing and almost got all of his assets scammed off him. The fact that he was dabbling in the real estate industry was also because Jasper had given him the idea. After investigating and realizing its potential, he immediately started up a company for it. In comparison to him, there was indeed much Jim had to learn. Jim gave it some thought and realized that Jasper was right. He smiled. That's just the kind of person he is. I can only attribute our years of tight friendship to fate. I must say that you two are very alike." Jasper smiled. "I'd like to think that we're more skilled at discerning. There are some things that you just can't give in. You take one step back, and you'll end up taking more until you fall off the cliff when you run out of steps to take. No one's going to pity you right now if you're not willing to fight." Jim fell deep in thought at that last remark and nodded in agreement. "Yeah." After meeting so many people of such influential family backgrounds in Swallow Capital all these years, I'm starting to feel a little lost as well. I'm always afraid that I'll accidentally offend someone. I think your profession plays a part in this too. You're a business consultant after all. It wouldn't be good for you to offend your customers." Jasper smiled and gave Jim some kind words so that he would not feel embarrassed. "Oh, Jasper, no wonder Dawson, that old fella, likes you so much. No one's ever been as successful as you at such a young age. I wouldn't say that your ability is any less than Dawson's back then. Yet I can't even find a tinge of an arrogant flame in you at all. This old fella has truly found himself a treasure this time." Jim exclaimed enviously. "Ah, you're too kind, Uncle Yap. There's not much to me for me to be arrogant about, since there are definitely people much greater than me. They're just keeping an even lower profile. That's all," Jasper stated with a slight smile. It was not an act, for Jasper truly believed from the depths of his heart that he was just a speck of dust in the world right now. His goal was to become a worldwide conglomerate. All he had accomplished up to this point was nothing in comparison to those conglomerates. After all, what these conglomerates controlled were the economies of multiple countries. Those were the true big shots, and Jasper refused to live a simple and plain life now that he got to start all over again. He had to grasp every opportunity there was so that he could make his way to even more sophisticated levels step by step. You're too humble, Jasper. But it's not a bad thing. It'll do you youngsters no good to be so arrogant anyway. Jim nodded, sighing internally in admiration. He did not dare to imagine how much more sophisticated Jasper could get if he kept on going at this rate. As they spoke, the two arrived at a luxurious-looking structure next to the workers' stadium. "We're here, Uncle Yap." The four-story building was not tall, but it did take up a large flat of land. There were 3 entrances and exits to the garden behind it. The mere building itself was extremely pricey. On the door were the words, "Hori Stock," and there were 2 servers at the door. "The Hori Stock is not open to the public, gentlemen. Please show your membership cards," a server requested courteously. Jasper glanced at Jim. There was no reason for him to have a membership card at all. "Hector told us to come in." Jim stepped up to speak. The server was stunned for a moment before an eerie smile graced his features. His attitude was no longer as polite when he replied simply, "You must be Jasper and Jim, then. You can just go inside. Mr. Coombe has already informed us of your arrival." Jasper did not delve into the change in the server's attitude and entered the doors. On the other hand, Jim glared at the servers who were looking down on them before he quickly followed Jasper inside. "Jesus, why on earth are those 2 even pretending to be cool? They're already dead men walking," murmured the server who had been glared at with his head down. Behind them, Julian suddenly halted and turned to look at the servers indifferently. He was smiling as he walked through the doors. The server was about to speak, only to be shocked when he found that the solid bronze handle had been bent out of shape from Julian's abnormal strength. His complexion paled, and the server was too taken aback to speak. All he could do was watch as Julian followed Jasper and walked farther away. Jasper entered the doors only to come to a halt just as he entered the large living room. A stream of water suddenly fell from above without warning and splashed the area just before Jasper's feet. Had Jasper not stopped in time, he would have been drenched by now. Jasper looked upward unfeelingly and saw Hector with a hand on the second-floor railing and an upturned bottle of mineral water. Hector laughed mirthfully as he threw the bottle right before Jasper. He spoke in neither a bright nor sinister tone. "You're in luck today. Come on up. I can't *King wait for you to present your head on a silver platter." Julian looked up to glare furiously at Hector as he stepped on the bottle of mineral water that bounced onto the side of Jasper's feet. All it would take was a word from Jasper, and Julian would dash upstairs to beat Hector up. "What's this? You brought a dog with you today?" Hector scoffed at Julian's fierce glare without a care. Jasper motioned for Julian to calm down as he walked up the stairs to the second floor. Standing before Hector, he asked while unfazed, "Is that all you've got?" Hector was infuriated by Jasper's carefree expression and smiled wretchedly. "Who are you faking this strong facade for? You won't even get the chance to cry later when I'm done with you." Jim was shocked when he witnessed how Jasper was a moment away from being drenched in water, and he could not help but speak. "Watch your words, Hector. Know your boundaries." Hector merely glanced at Jim coldly and sneered. "What are you so impatient for, old man? Relax. The 2 know. The 3 of you are going to die tonight. You're not the only one who wants me dead. Get in line. Not like any of you have ever gotten your wishes fulfilled, though." Jasper chuckled lightly. Hector squinted and stared at Jasper with a smirk. "Don't worry. I'll make sure you won't get to see tomorrow's sunshine. That's why people say that water runs deep in Swallow Capital. Don't think so highly of yourself just because you've earned a bit of money. Even the toughest and fiercest bow down to me here at Swallow Capital. How many lives do you think you have to act so pretentiously in front of me?" Hector smirked when he finished speaking and turned to enter the largest private room. Jim walked over and whispered to Jasper, "I have a bad feeling about this." "It's okay," Jasper replied calmly. I'd like to know what tricks he has up his sleeve. With that, Jasper then followed Hector into the private room. It was a large private room, big enough to host a party of more than a dozen people, but there was only one young man sitting in the middle of the sofa now. Hector walked over and leaned down to whisper to the man with whom he shared quite a few facial similarities. "He's here, Jacob." Jacob looked up and saw Jasper enter the room with the other two in tow. He smiled and walked over to stand in front of Jasper and Jim. Jim's heart squeezed at the sight of Jacob. Of course, he knew the man. He was Hector's older brother, and 4 times more the trouble than his younger sibling. "Jim Yap, is it? I've heard of your name. You've worked quite a while in Swallow Capital, haven't you?" Jacob smiled and continued to speak. "The business you do has no reason for you to provoke me. So why are you so impatient to get yourself killed?" At that, Jacob lifted a leg and kicked Jim's stomach without warning. Jim shouted at the pain and curled to wrap his arms over his stomach. Agony was written all over his face. However, Jacob showed no signs of stopping as he continued to speak coldly. "You could have lived healthily just fine. So why the hell did you have to provoke my brother?" He raised his hand to slap Jim. The moment he raised his hand, Jasper grabbed his wrist with a death grip. "You're going too far," Jasper stated. Jacob glared at Jasper coldly and flung his hand off with a sneer. "Who do you think you are? Were you to interrupt me?" Jasper ignored him and helped Jim stand. The man sucked in a cold breath at the pain. He asked kindly, "Are you all right, Uncle Yaps?" Jim shook his head and forced a smile. "I'm fine. Don't worry, I'll get them back for that kick," Jasper promised. Before Jim could speak, Hector began to snicker by the side after hearing that remark. "On what grounds? Don't you know that tonight's the night the 3 of you useless pieces of sh*t die?" Hector smiled as well and spoke arrogantly. "The Coombe family isn't one trash like you can afford to provoke. You're Jasper Lane, right? I hear that you're rich. Who knows if your money can save you tonight or not, Jasper looked at Jacob calmly and asked, "This is what you brothers prepared for me tonight?" Hector mocked, "Still so arrogant, even though you're a dead man. Just kill him, Jacob. These kinds of people won't know they're screwed until it's too late." Jacob smiled and glanced at Jasper coldly. "Don't worry, we still have another distinguished guest tonight. You 3 dogs will be the entertainment I provide my extinguished guests." He raised his hand to point at Jasper. "I want you to walk out that door on your knees later." Jacob's phone rang right after he spoke. Looking down, his expression changed and he turned to tell Hector, "Stay here and watch them. The guests are here. I'll go bring them up." Jacob then rushed out the door. Hector grinned maniacally as he looked at Jasper. "I've been waiting for this moment the entire day today. Just you wait. You'll know very soon that you can be as arrogant as you want in front of me, but you're just a useless piece of sh*t in comparison to our honorary guest." Jasper ignored Hector and helped Jim to the sofa at the sight of the other's ashen complexion. "Should I send you to the hospital first, Uncle Yap?" Jim shook his head. "I won't be able to walk with my joints and bones like this, but I'm fine. I can still hold on." Jasper nodded. "Just hold on for a little longer, then we'll decide what to do after I'm done dealing with this." Hector guffawed. "Mother***, you're moments away from death, and you still don't seem to regret a thing, do you? Deal with this? I'm the one finishing you 3 dogs here." At the same time, at the entrance to the Hoary Stock clubhouse, Jacob courteously opened the door of a Benz that had stopped outside. "Mr. Law," Jacob greeted with a charming smile. Henry glanced at the clubhouse disdainfully and pursed his lips. "This is it? The place you said is going to be full of fun?" Jacob quickly replied, "I'm sure you've seen your fair share of things since you grew up in Harbor City, Mr. Law. How would I dare one-up you like that? This is just a simple reception as a host to his guest." Henry scoffed. "Stop pretending to sound **king eloquent when you aren't. I don't like fake **cheese. Since you were attentive with my lodgings and stay here, I'm just returning the favor by taking a look." Yes, of course." Jacob led Henry through the doors. As they walked up the stairs, he spoke in a meaningful tone. "I found a few beauties for you, Mr. Law. They'll arrive shortly. We can wait in the private room first. I still have a few stupid **CKs to deal with, but you're welcome to stay and watch." Henry squinted and glanced at Jacob. "Showing off your strength in front of me now, are you?" Jacob's heartbeat faltered, and he immediately disagreed. You've misunderstood, Mr. Law. I wouldn't dare. Henry scoffed. I've seen enough of this behavior, but I don't care about it. Stupid F***CKs are everywhere. I'd like to know how you plan to deal with them, though. I suppose it's entertaining enough. Let's go. Jacob was elated, and he politely pushed open the private room doors while speaking in a bewitching tone. Don't worry, Mr. Law. I'm sure you'll be entertained. However, just as the doors were pushed open, Jacob suddenly realized that Henry was rooted where he stood by the door. Jacob looked up in confusion to see Henry wearing an expression of utter fright as he stared at Jasper in the private room. Does Mr. Law recognize Jasper? Henry felt his scalp grow numb. Why was Jasper here? Jasper was the one the Coon brothers were dealing with. Henry had not jumped at the sight of Jasper, but it was a close call. His first thought was a reflection of how there were so many coincidences in the world. Henry wanted to speak, but he saw the look Jasper gave him. With a gulp, Henry forced the words on the tip of his tongue down his throat. Jasper was stunned when he saw Henry as well. The only difference between them was that Jasper reacted quicker and gave Henry a warning glance when he realized that Henry was the aforementioned distinguished guest the brothers spoke of. He hinted to Henry not to expose their relationship. If the distinguished guest was anyone else, then Jasper might have had to put some effort into this. Yet luck seemed to be on his side when Henry walked in. Jasper could not help but feel that the heavens wanted to teach the Coon brothers a lesson tonight. The silent communication between Henry and Jasper went unnoticed by Jacob and Hector. What's wrong, Mr. Law? Jacob asked carefully. Henry gave Jacob the weirdest look and pointed at Jasper. This is the person you're dealing with? Jacob's heart dropped at the question, and he subconsciously nodded. Yes, good job. Henry chuckled gleefully and gave Jacob a big thumbs up. Henry meant it. He was indeed impressed by Jacob at that moment. Of all the people to offend, he just had to choose the most unfortunate one of all. Henry glanced at Jacob, realizing that he was indeed a mere mortal. Why was he so impatient for death? Forget everything else, but even Mitch and Zane from Harbor City had yet to take a breather after Jasper forcibly dragged them under his feet. Either Mitch or Zane alone was more than enough to completely overpower Jacob. In face of Henry's praise and the large thumb in front of him, Jacob could not help but feel that something was off. Jacob's heart shuddered as he thought back to how Henry had stared at Jasper for a long while outside the door earlier, and he asked carefully, Do you recognize him, Mr. Law? Blood drained from Jacob's face in fear. He was utterly screwed if Jasper turned out to be Henry's friend. It was just like selling coffins in front of Hades himself. Henry snickered and glanced at Jasper. Seeing how the latter did not react, Henry knew that Jasper was about to start ostentatiously tricking people again. There was no reason for him to put a damper on Jasper's fun, since past tragic experiences had taught him that he would be the only one suffering in the end. Nope, not at all. Henry replied with a fake smile and moved to sit on the couch loudly. Crossing his legs, he pretended not to know Jasper at all. Jacob's heart settled back in place at Henry's actions. He internally scoffed for spooking himself. He even almost gave himself a shock. Exactly who's Jasper? How could someone like him be acquainted with Mr. Law? One of them is a divine being, and the other is the muck of the earth. There's absolutely no reason for these two's paths to cross. With his heart settled, Jacob glanced at Jasper sinisterly and smirked. I'll give you a chance to beg for mercy, Jasper. How about that? Jasper glanced at Jacob calmly and replied in an unaffected tone. Oh, didn't you say you were going to kill me? Jacob laughed aloud and gave Hector a look. Hector snickered and walked toward the coffee table in front of Jasper, putting his leg on it. Pointing to the space between his legs, he snickered and spoke, Crawl between my legs and my brother, and I will give you the chance to beg for mercy. Jasper looked at Hector, his gaze calm like a lake of dead water. What if I don't want to crawl? Jasper asked instead. Jacob scoffed. Do I look like I'm giving you an option to choose from? Stupid. Either beg for mercy today, or I'll call someone to close yours and Jim's company down. Jim will have his license revoked. Trust me, I can easily do all of this and more. Jacob spoke with an arrogant laugh. Your relationship with Jim is great, right? His wife and child are both in Swallow Capital, and I think his son's doing his second year in a reputable high school. I'm afraid his wife and son will only suffer if I send word out." Jacob leaned into Jasper as he spoke and scoffed. "By then, not only will your company suffer, but Jim's entire family will also fall apart because of you." Jim's expression shifted as he roared. "Come at me, you coward. You think threatening my kids makes you so great?" Jacob straightened his back and spoke coldly. "Why the F***ck would I care whether I'm playing fair or not when we've already made it clear that I won't go easy on you guys tonight? You dumb F***ck? What? Your brain's F***kid over to now." Jacob then pointed at Jasper and asked, "So, are you crawling or not? If you are, then F***king get to it. Or you can choose to walk out of here on your knees and wait for me to take revenge." Jacob then turned to look at Henry and spoke. "You've never seen someone crawl between another's legs, have you, Mr. Law? You'll be able to see it soon. Ha." Henry clamped his mouth shut and shrugged, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with him. Jasper did not say anything, so Henry would continue acting. Even so, he really wanted to grab the wine bottle on the coffee table and swing it at the back of the two idiotic Coon brothers' heads. "I did some investigating." Jasper started to speak while looking unaffectedly at Jacob. "You Combs have produced quite the results when it comes to promoting through word of mouth. That's why both of you work in the media industry. You have quite the amount of media companies under your name, and you earn quite a bit every year." Jacob narrowed his eyes at Jasper and scoffed. "What's the point of saying all this now? What? Are you afraid? You want to give the company back? Sure, but you owe my brother 20 million worth of compensation for moral damage. Then I'll let you go." Hector's eyes shone, and he immediately agreed. "Exactly. 20 million is already taking pity on you. Give me back my company, and I'll let you go once my mood gets better. Or you can say goodbye to your only son." Jasper sighed. "It'll be much easier for me to strike back when you've got your own businesses in the media industry. Just wait, okay?" Jasper looked up to meet Jacob in Hector's eyes, and he spoke coolly. "Or you can also use your self-righteous ways to try and defeat me. Every man for himself." Jacob and Hector's expressions darkened, and they spoke coldly. "You really don't know when to quit, do you? You think you can fight me and swallow capital? On what basis? It'd be easier for me to crush you than an ant in swallow capital. You're ridiculous. Go back and wait for your company to close down. You're the one who's actively searching for death, Jasper. Don't blame me for leaving you with a remarkable lesson. I'll have you know that your tricks and your capital is nothing more than a fart to me. Or do you think you have the connections to deal with me? Let me tell you, people connect in circles and trash like you will only find friends that are equally trashy. As if you'd find someone who dares to stand up against me." Henry spat out the water he was drinking right at Jacob's face as the other talked big of himself. Instantly, Jacob had his face drenched. Henry stared at Jacob with dark eyes. "Jasper's friends are trashy. So you mean I'm trashy too?" With Henry's personality, there was no way he would endure this. Had Jasper not given him a look when he first entered, Henry would have ended these two brothers on the spot. "Mr. Law, what are you?" Jacob wiped his face. As he was arrogant and proud, this was the last thing he expected. He asked reflexively. Before he could complete his sentence, Henry had already sent a large slap across his face. "Mr. Law, your **king foot. How dare you call me trashy? You ***cur. F***CKU and your entire F***king family. B***teach." Henry got up spitting expletives from his mouth. His gaze was ice cold, and one slap across Jacob's face was hardly enough to satiate his anger. Henry raised his leg and kicked Jacob onto the floor, bringing Hector down with him. Following that, Henry turned to look at Jasper with an innocent look on his face. "Jesus, these two F***king idiots. I really couldn't hold it back anymore, Jasper. I'm sorry." The room fell silent, and the air seemed to freeze around them. The atmosphere of the room turned extremely weird. It took a while before Jacob and Hector, who lay dazedly on the floor, finally realized what was going on. At that moment, even idiots knew that Henry and Jasper were acquainted. Not only were they acquainted, but their bond was special too. Otherwise, Henry would never apologize to Jasper with that temperament of his. Jacob shivered, wondering just what kind of devil he and his brother had provoked. He was someone that even had Henry minding his opinion and emotions. Mr. Law, what? Jacob covered his face and stuttered. Before he could finish his sentence, Henry kicked him in the face again. It was a harsh kick, one that immediately gave Jacob a nosebleed. King told you not to call me Mr. Law. Henry's gaze was filled with anger. Plopping down on the sofa, he spoke with a sneer. How could I possibly accept such an honorary title from brothers as awfully great as the two of you? Don't you know who he is? What a good job you did there. Not even I dare to provoke him, yet the both of you act like you're some divine entity. One calls him a piece of trash, and the other calls him a stupid. F***ck. How about the both of you open up your F***king eyes and look carefully who the piece of trash and the stupid F***ck actually are here? Jacob and Hector stared at Jasper in shock. How could it be? Just who is this person? Isn't he just some rich businessman? What a couple of stupid F***cks. Henry scoffed. Has it never crossed your stupid F***king minds how he even has so much money despite his age? You think people without skills can do that? You two act like you're on top of the world just because you're from the residence, but do you honestly think that the money you have in your pockets can compete with his? Are you telling me it's never crossed your mind at all? Henry's words had both Hector and Jacob's heart thumping erratically in their rib cages. That's true. If he had no skills at all, then how could he have pulled out $600 million at such a young age to buy Easy Media? That was a point that the two brothers had neglected to think about. Jasper smiled and spoke. Don't listen to his bluff. I'm just a pretentious person whose company you're going to close down. You're also going to screw Jim's family over, right? What else? Jacob shivered and glanced at Henry secretly. The sneer on the other's face shot his fear and unease off the roof. Who are you? Jacob suppressed his fright and anger to ask. His dignity did not matter at that moment, for he just wanted to know who Jasper was. Hector looked at Jasper with the same frightened and unsettled gaze. He felt as if this ant he could so easily crush in his hands had suddenly transformed into a powerful dragon. It was too big of a difference for anyone to bear. Is my identity that important? Jasper asked plainly. Henry pursed his lips and turned to Jasper. Why are you wasting so much time on these two stupid F***cks? As if they'll know who the F***ck you are. They're just ignorant idiots. I say, you should just end their lives straight away and move on. Jacob and his brother's complexion paled. The brothers would have just laughed it off if anyone else had said so. But this was Henry Law. The man had the ability to make his words become a reality. Jacob evaluated the current situation and flipped himself over. Ignoring the blood on his face, he bent over and bowed to Jasper, apologizing in the most sincere attitude possible. I'm sorry. My brother and I have offended you. I apologize for our actions. Please forgive us. Jasper looked at Jacob calmly and smiled. Not bad, so you do know when to be humble. Well, don't you look sincere while apologizing? I'm sure you're scolding me to hell and back internally, though, aren't you? Jacob frantically disagreed. No, I wouldn't dare. You're a man of great virtue, young Master Lane. How would you waste your time on being calculative with minor characters like me? Let alone would I dare stay angry at you. Laughing, Jasper replied, I'm not a young master at all. I'm just a simple man from an ordinary family. I can't possibly compete with you people, so don't call me young Master Lane. Please forgive me and my brother, Mr. Lane. Jacob turned to look at Hector, who was still dazedly lying on the ground as he spoke. Fury suddenly surged through him, and he raised his hand to slap Hector across the face. Are you stupid? Apologize to Mr. Lane right now. As if he had just awoken from a dream, Hector clenched his teeth and stared at Jasper. Indignance burned in his heart. I'm sorry. Hector stood next to Jacob with his head down as he apologized unwillingly. Jasper ignored the two who were bent over an apology and instead turned to look at Jim, the man who still had not snapped out of his shock. I promised I'd get them back for that kick, Uncle Yap. Jim took in Jasper's smile. He would have shot up in joy had his stomach not hurt too much to stand. In less than 3 minutes, The entire plot had taken a harsh turn and changed the course of decades of history. Having made his living in Swallow Capital for so long, he knew better than anyone how the caste system pressurized people within its social circles. While Jacob and his brother were not prominent figures among the other members of Swallow Capital residents, they were overwhelming and bossy kings when it came to anyone else. Who's Mr. Law? This man seems to strike fear into the two brothers. What's more terrifying is Jasper, a man who this Mr. Law treats so respectfully. Just who is he? Jim found himself unable to see through his old friend's son-in-law. Jasper, Jim was a little scared. Don't worry, Uncle Yap. They won't dare do anything to you, Jasper replied calmly. Seeing the calm expression on Jasper's face, Jim took a deep breath to control the excitement and fright he felt. He turned to look at the Coombe brothers, who both sported uneasy expressions on their faces. Resentment and infuriation bubbled instantly within Jim. Without anyone behind his back, Jim had to bend to everyone's will because he was not strong enough to stand on his own. Now that I have Jasper, what more do I have to fear? At the thought, new hatred added to old resentments, and they overwhelmed Jim, who lifted his leg to kick Jacob in the stomach. Jacob yelled painfully at the kick and staggered backward, only for his knees to wobble before he kneeled onto the floor. Watching Jacob grab his stomach and crouch forward before his eyes, Jim realized that he had never felt as joyful in decades. You had fun when you kicked me, didn't you? With a wretched expression, Jim went over to deliver 2 more kicks. Hector's complexion paled sickeningly as he watched how Jacob yelped in pain, yet still refused to fight back. He turned his head and made way for the door. However, Julian was standing by the door the moment he turned around, like a statue of a mythical god. The strength was zapped from Hector's legs, and the man fell on his knees with a thud before Jasper. I'm sorry, brother. Please don't hit me. I'm sorry. It's my fault for being so blind. Damn my stupid *king eyes. Please forgive me. Jasper crossed his legs and looked at Hector, his expression unfazed while the other continued to beg him for mercy. Beside him, Henry opened a bottle of brandy and poured Jasper a glass. The sight made Hector shudder. Within their circle of trust fund babies, one did not pour alcohol for just any other person. Henry's actions were a statement that Jasper held a higher position than he did. Jasper, however, did not think much of it. If anything, Jasper only looked at the glass in distaste. I don't drink brandy. Jasper would occasionally sip on red and white wine, but he preferred to keep a respectful distance from foreign alcohol. Henry pursed his lips. This bottle costs $160,000. I can't even afford this normally. Jasper smiled. I didn't know that there's alcohol even Mr. Law can't afford. Henry's expression darkened. You know very well how my old man likes to control my allowances. Not to mention that my sister refuses to help me financially either. I'm her brother. On the topic of alcohol, my old man has 2 crates of 30-year-old whiskeys from his boss when he came to Swallow Capital 30 years ago. There's no way he'd let me drink it just like that, but that's what we had when you came over for dinner those 2 times. I'm sure my old man will say yes if you remind him of it the next time you come over. Henry's eyes shone as he schemed with Jasper, plotting how he could get his hands on his father's alcohol. He had no idea that their exchange was causing shivers to run up Jacob, Hector, and Jim's backs. This old man Henry is speaking of. It has to be Zachary Law, the man of the Law family. Henry's words had given them information that would stun the entire circle of trust fund babies in Swallow City. Not only was Jasper and Henry close, but the former was someone who could easily walk in and out of their house. The Law family had invited Jasper over to dinner twice. What does that mean, you may ask? That means that Jasper is more than just Henry's friend. Jasper is friends with the Law family. This is a completely different concept. Jasper's identity and status had instantly and infinitely shot up. No one in their generation could enter the Law family's house as they pleased, or was even considered a family friend of the Laws. Jacob and the other two's emotions were still in havoc when Henry spoke again. My sister came to Swallow City too. She's resting in her hotel room now. All she does every day is rush me to wrap my business up so I can bring her over to you and give you a surprise. How about you? Come back with me later? We'll give her a surprise this time. Jim, Jacob, and Hector all looked at Jasper with strange and complicated gazes. They finally understood who Jasper was. He was the Law family's son-in-law. Now, everything made sense. "She's here too?" Jasper exclaimed in shock. "All right, let's wrap this up then." With that, Jasper stood up and walked over to Jacob and Hector. The two's faces were drained of color. "To be absolutely honest, I'm just a mere businessman. The main reason why I don't want to come in contact with members of the residents is because of how troublesome it is." Jasper's words were met with weird expressions on the brothers, but the two had nothing to say. "But trouble just like to look for me when I refuse to look for it. Say, for example, the two of you. Not that I'll be afraid when trouble comes knocking at my door. Just because I don't actively look for trouble doesn't mean I'm afraid of it. That's my motto." At that, Jacob forced himself to speak. Mr. Lane, this is indeed my and my brother's fault. Please forgive us this one time. I promise that we won't trouble you again." Jasper smiled. "I believe you." Jasper's words had Jacob and his brother breathing a large sigh of relief. "That everything you say right now is the truth, but I can't be certain that one day you won't think back to the humiliation you felt tonight and come up with a plan to trouble me. I told you, didn't I? I don't like trouble." Jasper's tone was getting progressively harsher. Jacob wiped the blood from his face and begged again. "Please, Mr. Lane, I promise that we won't trouble you again. If I tell you to leave the media and entertainment industry, will you?" Jasper asked. Jacob's expression changed. The industry was the Coombe family's main source of income. He earned tens of millions of profit annually from the few companies under his name. This was not a question of whether he was willing to or not, since it interfered with his family's roots. He did not have the right to decide. "Seems like you won't." Jasper took in Jacob's expression and stated faintly, "Since you're unwilling to leave on your own, I'll just have to kick you out myself." Seeing Jasper's firm attitude, Hector opened his mouth to protest by the side. "You're going too far, Jasper." Hector did not hold back. "So what if Jasper is formidable? He's still an outsider, and I refuse to believe that the Law family will sever ties with us just because of him. They would apologize if that was what he wanted, but there was no way the Coombe brothers would agree when told to cut a source of their family's fortune." "I'm going too far?" Jasper looked at Hector intriguingly and replied in an unaffected tone. "Out of everyone here, you're the last person who has the right to tell me that I've gone too far." Jacob held Hector back before his brother could refute and turned to look at Jasper. "We'll apologize if that's what you want, but I cannot agree if you want us to exit the media and entertainment market. Leave the Coombe family some dignity, Mr. Lane. Let's just end this here before we pass the point of reconciliation. It'll do no good to either of us." "Good. You're alacritus. I like talking to alacritus people." Jasper chuckled and pulled out his phone. The first call he made was to Easy Media's general manager. "There'll be a meeting at the conference room tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and I want all department deputy managers and above in attendance. It'll be a video call with Harbor City's Advent Entertainment Group, previously known as Gladness Movies. Contact the technical department in advance so they can set things up." With that, Jasper then made the second phone call, without even a glance at the ugly expressions the Coombe brothers sported. "Ryder, it's me, Jasper. There'll be a video conference at 8 a.m. tomorrow with Mainland's Easy Media that I've already bought. The meeting will discuss mainly the partnership between the two media companies to develop the entertainment industry in Mainland, as well as canceling the 3 media companies in Swallow Capital." Jacob looked at Jasper in utter shock. That moment, he finally knew that Jasper was the hidden owner behind Harbor City's Gladness Movies. Harbor City's entertainment industry was more than 10 times more developed than Mainland, and Gladness Movies was one of the top 4 companies in Harbor City. Naturally, the fact had Jacob stricken. While the 3 companies under Jacob's name did require his family's resources to develop the way it had today, to compare it to Gladness Movies would be comparing a village community to an urban group. Incomparable. That was not all, for Jasper then turned to ask Henry. More than half of Mainland's media companies are in partnership with those in Harbor City, hoping to exchange a spot in the market with resources. "Could you help me send the word when you return to Harbor City?" Henry chuckled and replied, "Sure, their companies in Harbor City will definitely be at an impasse. But I don't think you need my help, though. Just having that Ryder dude of yours send word on your behalf should be good enough." Your name hits stronger than mine when it comes to the big shots in Harbor City. Jasper laughed and turned his wrist to show the back of his hand. All right then, we're done here, let's go. Henry got up and followed Jasper out. Jim quickly followed after as well. Just as Jasper got to the door, he heard Jacob roar at him from behind. Do you really want to go that far, Jasper? You won't get anything out of cornering the Coombe family. Jasper pulled the door open by its handle and turned to glare at Jacob and Hector with a wretched and fierce gaze. King childish. Then he turned and left. The luxurious private room was suddenly empty, leaving Hector and Jacob to stand embarrassingly alone inside. Hector glanced at Jacob's bloodied and pitiful face. He handed a few pieces of tissue to his brother and whispered, Here, Jacob, wipe the blood off your face first. Should we go to the hospital? Jacob could feel his face and body burning with pain. Jacob wiped the blood off, his eyes flaring red with anger. And Jim King riding on their coattails. Thinking about how more than half of his injuries were caused by Jim, Jacob wanted nothing more than to drag Jim back and cut him to death. King hell. Jim's nothing more than a piece of trash. Hitting and kicking you just because Jasper and Henry were here. He must have a King death wish. Hector clenched his teeth and spoke. Indignation flared within him, and Jacob spat out the words resentfully. Jim's just a nobody. We can deal with him however we want. The problem here is Jasper. There's too much about him that we don't know about. I didn't expect him to be so strong. Fear flashed through Hector's eyes. What do we do now, Jacob? Jasper didn't look like he plans to let us go at all. Not to mention that he still has Henry supporting him. Let's go home first. We'll discuss this with Dad. Jacob clenched his teeth and spoke. Hector shuddered and replied with fear. Dad's going to kill me when he finds out. Jacob glared at Hector and growled. We would never have gotten to this point had you not provoked the wrong people outside. You useless piece of trash. You heard the call Jasper made just now, didn't you? Harbor City's Gladness Entertainment Movies is his too. We have nothing to fear when it comes to Easy Media, but how long can my companies hold on if his company from Harbor City steps foot here? Does this look like a problem either one of us can deal with? I'd rather we confess now than confess when we've gone beyond the point of saving. Go home with me now. Are you sure you don't need to go to the hospital, Uncle Yap? It's better to let a doctor take a look. Jasper asked Jim kindly after descending the stairs in the clubhouse. Jim shook his head and smiled. It's just a small injury. I'll be fine after a bit of rest. Jasper nodded. All right then, I still have other things to do, so I'll have Julian send you back. Jim hummed an acknowledgement and glanced at Henry not too far away, carefully. Jasper, about you and the Law family. Despite the truth written before his eyes, Jim still could not believe that Jasper was so close to the Law family, especially when it came to Jasper's attitude. Jim could tell that they were more than just friends. It was very unusual for the son of such a prominent family to treat Jasper with not an ounce of temperament, but instead with respect and slight fear. Jasper smiled and replied, I spent some time in Harbor City and worked with the Law family before. It's something Dawson knows about. Jim nodded in understanding and reminded, Be careful then. Jasper gave him a small smile. I know my limits. Jim still wanted to ask Jasper what his relationship with the Law family's daughter was, but he sighed and swallowed his words back when he saw that Jasper was already walking toward Henry. Despite without the qualifications to be a part of such a high social class, Jim had made a living in Swallow Capital for so many years now that he knew relationships of husband and wife were mere lies to feed the common folk. All those truly with power and authority were surrounded by women, especially when it came to members of the residence. If they came from a wealthy family, women were something they did not lack, especially rich daughters who were flirty and had family backgrounds prominent enough to scare people to death. For a young and rich man like Jasper, who was skilled and mature in the ways he acted and dealt with issues, he was a promising talent worth the investment of these rich daughters. Still, Jasper's love life was not something an outsider like Jim could give his 2 cents on. Getting into the car with Henry, Jasper turned to ask him, Why did you come to Swallow Capital? Henry did not hide it from him and instead leaned to chuckle by Jasper's ear. We got a big thing lined up this time. You know how Swallow Capital was approved to host the Olympics? Jasper nodded. There was no way he would not know about something when the entire country was celebrating it. However, Jasper suddenly widened his eyes. The Law family did more than real estate, for they also dabbled in the sports industry. The Law family had been the one to take on Swallow Capital's Olympic Village project in the past life. It was a large project that cost $30 billion. What mattered the most was not the size of this project, but how much one could potentially earn from it. It was a national-level project, and countless people had their eyes on it. Probably everyone in the entire country did too. The prestige and brand effect of its completion was enough to urge countless real estate businessmen to fight for it even at the cost of making a loss. Now that he thought about it, after Swallow Capital was approved to host, there were only less than 8 years before the Olympics. It was indeed time to begin planning for Olympic Village. Olympic Village? Jasper asked. This time, Henry was the one whose eyes widened in shock. No way. All I did was tell you about Swallow Capital being approved for hosting the Olympics, and you already thought of Olympic Village? Henry really wanted to open Jasper's skull to take a look at what was inside. Before he came over, his dad Zachary had called him over to the study. It had taken him a long time before he understood what Swallow Capital being approved for hosting the Olympics had to do with his family. Even then, he only understood because his dad had told him straight up. Yet Jasper got the meaning in such a short amount of time. Henry could not help but suspect if his IQ was truly that low. Jasper knew he guessed correctly by Henry's reaction. He smiled and replied, "Why did Uncle Law trust you with such an important project?" Henry's expression darkened, and he replied disgruntledly, "What's wrong with me? It's not like I lost an arm or a leg. What's wrong with me being the representative?" Henry felt discouraged when he saw how Jasper looked at him with a shadow of a smile on his lips. Fine. I'll tell you the truth. I'm actually here to scope out the competition since the entire project is technically on paper but yet to be confirmed. When people are truly fighting for it, then Dad will come and secure the project himself. Jasper nodded seriously. That makes more sense. It's more than just the Olympic Village this time. There are still a few main stadium structures that we're interested in, like the swimming, track, and archery venues. Jasper shook his head. I think you should put your focus on a few projects that you're certain about. The entire Olympic Stadium will be an immense project as a whole, and there's no way one person can finish the entire cake. You'd die from plant trashing, you know? Henry's eyes widened in horrification when he looked at Jasper. That's literally what my dad said. How on earth do you do that? Especially rich daughters who were flirty and had family backgrounds prominent enough to scare people to death. For a young and rich man like Jasper, who was skilled and mature in the ways he acted and dealt with issues, he was a promising talent worth the investment of these rich daughters. Still, Jasper's love life was not something an outsider like Jim could give his 2 cents on. Getting into the car with Henry, Jasper turned to ask him, "Why did you come to Swallow Capitals?" Henry did not hide it from him, and instead leaned to chuckle by Jasper's ear. "We got a big thing lined up this time. You know how Swallow Capital was approved to host the Olympics?" Jasper nodded. There was no way he would not know about something when the entire country was celebrating it. However, Jasper suddenly widened his eyes. The Law family did more than real estate, for they also dabbled in the sports industry. The Law family had been the one to take on Swallow Capital's Olympic Village project in the past life. It was a large project that cost $30 billion. What mattered the most was not the size of this project, but how much one could potentially earn from it. It was a national-level project, and countless people had their eyes on it. Probably everyone in the entire country did too. The prestige and brand effect of its completion was enough to urge countless real estate businessmen to fight for it even at the cost of making a loss. Now that he thought about it, after Swallow Capital was approved to host, there were only less than 8 years before the Olympics. It was indeed time to begin planning for Olympic Village. Olympic Village? Jasper asked. This time, Henry was the one whose eyes widened in shock. No way. All I did was tell you about Swallow Capital being approved for hosting the Olympics, and you already thought of Olympic Village? Henry really wanted to open Jasper's skull to take a look at what was inside. Before he came over, his dad Zachary had called him over to the study. It had taken him a long time before he understood what swallow capital being approved for hosting the Olympics had to do with his family. Even then, he only understood because his dad had told him straight up. Yet Jasper got the meaning in such a short amount of time. Henry could not help but suspect if his IQ was truly that low. Jasper knew he guessed correctly by Henry's reaction. He smiled and replied, "Why did Uncle Law trust you with such an important project?" Henry's expression darkened, and he replied disgruntledly, "What's wrong with me? It's not like I lost an arm or a leg. What's wrong with me being the representative?" Henry felt discouraged when he saw how Jasper looked at him with a shadow of a smile on his lips. Fine, fine. I'll tell you the truth. I'm actually here to scope out the competition since the entire project is technically on paper, but yet to be confirmed. When people are truly fighting for it, then Dad will come and secure the project himself." Jasper nodded seriously. "That makes more sense. It's more than just the Olympic Village this time. There are still a few main stadium structures that we're interested in, like the swimming, track, and archery venues." Jasper shook his head. "I think you should put your focus on a few projects that you're certain about. The entire Olympic Stadium will be an immense project as a whole, and there's no way one person can finish the entire cake. You die from plant ration, you know?" Henry's eyes widened in horrification when he looked at Jasper. "That's literally what my dad said. How on earth do you do that?" Henry lay on the bed angrily and indignantly while bemoaning. He was Anna's brother, and as her brother, he brought Jasper back only to be treated no more like a driver who said sister proceeded to get rid of once Jasper arrived. Then he heard knockings on his door. Excited, Henry wondered if his sister had finally found her conscience and came to apologize as well as invite him to join their conversation. "Umph, now do you remember what I've done for you? Now you're sorry?" He would stand his ground and make sure his sister knew that it would not be so easy to beg him for his forgiveness. With that, Henry opened the door, his arrogance slightly slipping into his supposedly stoic facade. "Are you here to apologize? Where's the law fight you brought over from Harbor City?" Anna fiercely cut Henry off and forced the other to swallow his words. Henry's eyes widened as he asked warily, "What do you want?" "I saved that law fight for myself." "Give it to me," Anna replied emotionlessly. Henry's expression darkened. Had she no respect for her brother? "You wish." Henry decided that he would fight to the death for his dignity. Anna smirked. "Are you sure? Dad told me to watch over you before we left. Or should I call Dad and tell him that you're spending every night drinking and have forgotten what you came here to do?" Henry's lips paled in anger. "That's a lie, and we both know it. Do you think Dad's going to trust me or you?" Anna's lips quirked at a devilish angle. Thinking about how this was the first time his dad had given him such an important job and how his sister's false accusation would easily screw him over, Henry's lips paled further. "Screw you!" Stuffing the bottle of wine into Anna's arms harshly, Henry's expression darkened. "You don't even drink alcohol. What do you want my law fight for anyway?" "Jasper likes red wine." Anna carried the law fight in her arms and turned to leave with a chuckle. Stunned, Henry stomped his feet angrily. "What the F asterisk CK? You're doing it for him. Jesus Christ, at least invite me too. That's an 82 law fight. I only have 3F asterisk king bottles myself." Henry marched out of the room indignantly and followed Anna tightly. Anna ignored him and returned to the room, waving the bottle of red wine before Jasper's eyes as if in wait for praise. "An 82 law fight, want to try?" Then, she casually pointed to Henry for him to open the bottle. Henry found the bottle opener, and he felt his heart cry silently. "What the F asterisk CK? How could she cheat my wine off me? Then treat me like I'm her waiter? I'm your brother here. We're related. By blood." Jasper smiled. He took a look at Henry's extremely stormy expression and got a gist of what was happening. "Great. I'd like to discuss with Henry about securing the Olympic Village project." Henry's ears perked up as he grinned. With Jasper's help, his chance of success would now increase by more than 50%. He wanted to ask Jasper, "Would you like something to go with your wine, brother-in-law? I'll buy it all for you right now." It must be known that Henry currently had no doubts when it came to Jasper's ability. He admired the man extremely and wished to become a man like Jasper. "Quick, Jasper, tell me your thoughts." In the hotel room, Jasper and Henry clinked their wine glasses. Logically speaking, with the news of being approved for hosting the Olympics still fresh, it should still be a while before the construction plans for the Olympic Village and the other stadiums begin. What else did your dad ask you to do? Henry nodded. Nothing we know is certain yet, but we have to get in on it somehow. Dad says that since it's such a huge project, it'd be better if I come over and give my stand earlier rather than too late. And for us who want in on it to hand a planning report to the people in charge of it all. The people in charge want to adopt as many ideas as possible, since this is a huge stadium we're constructing. It's not a design a company or two can come up with from the top of their heads. Every stadium has to be the best of the best. That's why every party is given the chance to hand in a report, suggesting the design, location, and even the name. Since all of this can be shown through a report, even though the people in charge didn't say it, everyone knows that it'll bring great benefits if your proposal gets chosen. Jasper's eyes glowed. Do you have a proposal yet? Henry replied honestly. Something this big must be designed by a professional team, but there's only so many sophisticated designers in the country. There are too many people fighting for them, and even though the Law family are close with a few of them, nothing's been promised yet. Jasper nodded in understanding and added, "Tell me when you're starting. I might have a few ideas that can help." The overall plan for the Honeycomb Stadium, the Aquatic Center, and the Olympic Village were all in his mind. After a round of realistic suggestions, Jasper had the most suitable design proposal and the biggest grasp. All he had to do was hand in the proposal with content from his previous life, and it would definitely be chosen. You know about designing too? Henry seemed suspicious. Jasper smiled. Not about designing, no, but I do have ideas. Henry shrugged. He was about to speak when his phone suddenly rang. Seeing that it was an unknown number, Henry did not want to pick it up at all. Yet every time he hung up the call, the other party would just call again. What do you want? It's the middle of the night here. You'd better have a good F*King reason to be calling me so late, or I'll F*King kill you. Henry roared into the phone angrily. The other party must have said something, for Henry's brows arched slightly and his expression turned intrigued. A short moment later, Henry's tone softened as he chuckled. I wouldn't mind meeting you in person, of course not. But I have to tell you that all I'll be doing if I come is watch. I'll still have to ask if the man himself is willing or not. Henry then handed the phone to Jasper and mouthed, "Coom." Taking the phone, Jasper greeted, "Hello, this is Jasper Lane." The deep voice of a middle-aged man came through the speakers. Without an ounce of anger or arrogance, the man sounded very polite. "Hello, Mr. Lane. This is Hendrik Coom, Hector and Jacob's father." Jasper raised his brows slightly and replied in a faint tone, "How can I help you, Mr. Coom?" Hendrik replied, "I believe that there has been a misunderstanding between you and my sons, Mr. Lane. They've told me the basic details of what happened when they returned home tonight. I only recently realized how arrogant and bossy my sons have been acting outside, and I cannot be more remorseful about their actions. I hope that you can accept my apology, Mr. Lane, and forgive my sons for their ignorance." Jasper gave a small smile and replied, "Hector and Jacob are both adults, Mr. Coom. It's only right that they bear responsibility for their own actions. You shouldn't trouble yourself to clean up after their messes." Hendrik replied sincerely, "It's my responsibility as a parent to teach my children what is right and wrong. Peace is important when it comes to us businessmen. Another friend is one less business enemy. You seem to be interested in developing in the media and entertainment industry, Mr. Lane. How about this? Since I do business in a similar field, we can agree on a time and talk about it in person? We're planning to hold a huge banquet in celebration of Swallow Capital being approved to host the Olympics. We could talk about this, Mr. Lane, and your company could host this banquet if you're interested." Jasper gave it some thought, and Hendrik did not speak anymore. Instead, he waited quietly for Jasper's reply. It may seem like silence, but in truth, Jasper and Hendrik were both testing each other. Basically, if Jasper responded, then it meant that he had no desire to fight the Coom family beyond the point of reconciliation. This was the world of adults. Love and hatred did not exist, for everything was merely a transaction of benefits. If I had more power, then you would have to give in. If you had more power, then there was no one to blame but myself for my failure. This was something both Jasper and Hendrik were very well aware of. A short moment later, Jasper chuckled and replied, "I'd be an idiot not to take up your offer considering your compromise, Mr. Coombe. How's tomorrow's sound?" Hendrik smiled. "All right then, tomorrow night it shall be. I'll fetch both you and Mr. Law then. What a coincidence that I'm attending a gala tomorrow night, and most of the people in attendance are those within the industry. We can get to know each other better." Jasper gave a polite but non-committal reply before hanging up the phone. "What does Coombe want?" Henry asked. Jasper replied faintly, "To resolve the resentment, perhaps." "Perhaps?" Henry was stunned. His attitude was great, though. "Didn't he say he wants to write this whole thing off?" Jasper laughed. "He plans to have me host the celebratory banquet for Swallow Capital, hosting the Olympics in return for leaving his sons alone. It might not seem like much of a trick, but he wants to announce it at the gala tomorrow night, of all time and places. Don't you find it weird?" Henry frowned. Most people would beg to keep this under wraps. So why would he want to announce it at a gala? Has he gone mad? Anna interrupted. "From what I can tell, the host for the celebratory banquet has most likely already been decided. After all, this is a boon to both the host's fame and fortune. Everyone's going to be fighting for it no matter what, especially when it's about something as grand as Swallow Capital being approved for hosting the Olympics. The person who has already been decided will likely be present, and you'll be targeted tomorrow night." Jasper nodded at Anna's analysis. "That's what I'm thinking as well. What the F***CK? The Combs old man is even more difficult to deal with than his stupid F***king sons. How could he be so vile? I'm calling him and scolding the F***CK out of him." Henry was pissed. "Calm down." Jasper stopped Henry. "This is still just a guess. Even if this is the truth, it's still a hidden plan. Unless, that is, we turn against him straight away and we meet the fight head-on. What Hendrik means is that they're going to hand out the benefits, but whether we reap them or not will depend on our own ability. There's no way he can take them back even if we don't manage to reap them, since the Coombe family has already been kicked out of the equation with this incident alone." Henry's expression darkened. "Isn't this letting him off too lightly? We don't even benefit from this at all then." Jasper narrowed his eyes. "The world is hardly as benevolent as we make it out to be. It's not going to be that easy for him to shift the blame. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters." Inside a family compound in Swallow City, Hendrik put down the phone, his expression calm. Jacob and Hector looked at their father apprehensively. In the end, it was still Jacob who bit the bullet and asked, "Dad, did he agree?" Hendrik answered calmly. "He agreed." Hector breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this. Nonetheless, he could not resist sneering. "And here I was thinking he's so capable. Doesn't this show that he's afraid of falling out with us? We've given him a way out to save him any embarrassment, and he's accepted it. At least he's being sensible." Hendrik eyed Hector coldly and scolded him. "How did I ever produce such a mentally deficient son like you?" Hector did not know where he had made a mistake with his comments. His face betrayed his dissatisfaction, but he did not dare to provoke Hendrik. "He's smart, that's what he is. You think he's afraid?" "If he was afraid, tonight he wouldn't have made a move to crush the several media companies that our family owns," Hendrik said angrily. "He's already taken whatever revenge necessary on the two of you. Since that's over and done with, he isn't afraid of whatever we do next. He's confident he can handle it. However, he's conveniently taking this way out because we brought out benefits or exchange. Compared with giving vent to a moment of anger, it's the benefits you obtain that are the real deal. When will the two of you finally understand this? This is what people refer to as knowing when to advance or retreat, boldly and astutely. Look at the two of you. What do you know? All you know how to do is to be jealous of each other and vie for favor like cats and dogs. And you still think you're such big shots?" Jacob asked. "Then what should we do tomorrow, Dad?" Hendrik lit a cigarette and took a long drag. He said solemnly, "I've relinquished the celebration banquet that's being held in honor of the successful bid for the Olympic Games." Jacob's expression changed when he heard this. "Dad, this banquet is really important. Who knows how many of the big shots will be watching it? Besides, didn't we already ask the Turner family to host it? If we go back on our word, we're not going to be able to face the wrath of the Turner family." Hendrik gave a cold laugh. Since I have the right of approval, I have no opinion either way whether it goes to the Turner family or to Jasper. Whoever gets it, well, that will depend on how capable they are. Jacob pondered for a moment. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. Pleasantly surprised, he exclaimed, "Dad, you mean you're going to let them fight it out between themselves?" With a mocking laugh, Hendrik scoffed. "You think it's so easy to obtain benefits from the Kuhn family? When the banquet begins tomorrow, both of you keep a low profile. Don't act like big shots, and don't say anything you shouldn't be saying. Tomorrow, we're not the main focus. That should be the Turner family and Jasper. Maybe even Henry. We'll just be spectators." The next day, Jasper went to Easy Media first to hold a video conference. However, for this meeting, Jasper temporarily deferred his conquest of White Media Company. Instead, he focused on the integration of resources between the two companies. Jasper's initial plan was for the mainland and Harbor City companies to develop side by side and advance together in the domestic entertainment market. Particularly with regards to the mainland market, he had the advantage of his memories from before his reincarnation. He was very much aware that the mainland entertainment market would be an extremely large one in the future, worth hundreds of billions. Such a large slice of the proverbial pie needed to be prepared for in advance. Although the film industry in Harbor City was now going into a decline, the entertainment industry consisted of more than just movies. What was more, there were far more celebrities in Harbor City than in the mainland, and their popularity was also significantly higher. An alliance between these two companies, therefore, would be able to achieve unheard of results. Furthermore, even when weakened, the strong were still strong. With the top 4 large film companies in Harbor City operating together, developing the mainland market would be much easier. The meeting that was initially scheduled for 3 hours lasted the entire day. At the end of the meeting, the two companies had drafted an outline for their development in the next 2 years. Besides, Advent Entertainment Group would also send out a management team to aid Jasper in seizing Easy Media in a death grip. Although the top executives of Easy Media felt somewhat begrudging about their diminution of power, no one dared say anything as Jasper was now the big boss. They had to accept reality. After the meeting ended, the car the White family had dispatched to pick up Jasper was already parked in front of the company. Jasper realized there was only Henry inside upon getting in. Anna doesn't like these elite gatherings. Some of her close friends back in university came to Swallow Capital for their development, so she is headed out today to meet her friends. She asked me to inform you that she won't be going, Henry explained. Jasper nodded and thought for a moment. He then called Julian and told him to keep an eye on Anna and protect her. Although no one in Swallow Capital had the guts to bully Anna, at the end of the day, this was not Harbor City. If any shallow local thugs wanted to cause Anna trouble, everything could be settled with Julian around. Jasper and Henry arrived at a restaurant about half an hour later. The gate looked ordinary, and so was the quadrangle, but it was located in the central area of Swallow Capital. It was only a 10-minute walk from the Imperial Palace. Even now, in the year 2000, the housing prices here had already exceeded $100,000 per square meter. The housing in this area could not be purchased with money even if one was rich in the future. No housing property would drift into the market at all. When my grandfather and father came to Swallow Capital earlier on, they liked the dishes from Shallow Grass Hall the most, apart from the state banquet. It can be considered the true first-rate private kitchen. Henry moved closer to Jasper as he began to flaunt his insight. I heard that the dishes here are not priced at all, and what you eat depends on the head chef's mood. You only deposit the money to the head chef's account after the meal. $1 is not too small, 1 million is not too much. I heard that a boss once paid 10 million for a 6-course meal. However, most people who can afford to come here for a meal are not so high profile. Usually, a few $100,000 as a token of thanks suffices. I reckon Hendrik has paid quite a price to organize the banquet here. Jasper nodded as he listened. The two of them crossed the tall door sill and entered the quadrangle. A rubble wall came into view as soon as they entered. This kind of wall in the quadrangle was designed for a purpose. They were also called retaining walls and were used to block off the cold winds during winter and keep the space from freezing up. After going around the rubble wall and along the glazed tile corridor that was carved with dragons and phoenixes, They walked through the twists and turns until they arrived at the intersection. The winding path led them to a quiet and secluded place. The uniqueness and ingenuity of the quadrangle were revealed for all to see. Find out later if there are any houses with quadrangles for sale in Swallow Capital. I can buy and keep them, Jasper suddenly said to Henry, who was beside him. Henry looked at Jasper weirdly and asked, "The prices of houses with quadrangles in Swallow Capital are now outrageous. Even those smaller ones with poorer geographic locations have base prices of tens of millions. Are they worth it?" Jasper smiled and said, "Don't worry, no matter how high the prices are, it's cheaper to buy them now. The prices in a few years will be even more outrageous, and they'll be even more highly sought after." Henry nodded. After going through so many things, he would rather doubt that the sun was square than Jasper's insights and investments. He silently kept this matter in mind. The two of them walked along the corridor and went around the rockery and pond. As soon as they arrived outside the door of a guest room, they heard the vigorous voice of a man from inside. "Where did this sorry lot of people come from? The party will be arranged by the Turners. Whoever takes that away from me is disrespecting the Turner family. Who is so brave as to stop me from taking care of my business in Swallow Capital? Why don't they cut their own coat according to their cloth?" Henry, who was outside, called out, "Hey!" He immediately pushed open the door when he heard the voice. "Which idiot is making a ruckus here? Turner family this, Turner family that. What's the matter? Is the Turner family so great that they can ascend to the heavens?" Henry's words drew everyone's attention in the room. Hector and Jacob were sitting obediently on the side. A middle-aged man with white hair and a steady presence whom Jasper did not recognize was sitting in the host's seat. It seemed that the person was Hendrik. On Hendrik's left sat a young man in his 30s. He was dressed exquisitely, but obstinance was written all over his face. At this moment, he was staring at Henry with a flash of cold light in his gaze. This person should be the person from the Turner family who was speaking before. Upon seeing Henry and Jasper, Hendrik stood up with a smile and said, "Young Master Law and Mr. Lane, you're here?" Hendrik walked over as he spoke. He first reached out to Jasper and said, "Mr. Lane, I, Hendrik Coombe, actually invited you two to the banquet today to bury the hatchet. I thank Mr. Lane profusely for showing up." Jasper shook hands with Hendrik and said coolly, "This banquet that you've so meticulously prepared is wonderful, Mr. Coombe. Of course, I had to show up." Jasper's words were meaningful. Hendrik smiled and pretended that he understood nothing. "You're very welcome, Mr. Lane, Mr. Law. Both of you come here and quickly have a seat." As he led the two of them to have a seat, Hendrik approached Eric. He patted Eric on the shoulder affectionately and said, "This is the Turner family's young master, Eric Turner. Everyone's part of the same industry here. I'm sure there might even be opportunities for collaboration once we have a chat with one another." As soon as these words were uttered, Eric sneered and said, "Not every Tom, Dick, or Harry deserves to have a meal with me. I despise filth immensely." Upon hearing this, Henry immediately narrowed his eyes to reveal an ominous glint. He had always been the one who said such comments to others. Since when was it someone else's turn to turn the table against him? "Aren't you pretty King insolent?" Henry sneered and said. Eric darted a look at Henry and said indifferently, "Henry Law, don't think that the Law family is all that great. The person who others respect is Old Master Law, a heroic figure. What does that have anything to do with you? At the end of the day, the Law family only has some power in Harbor City, but you're really taking advantage of their influence after coming to Swallow Capital. Who the hell do you think you are, Henry Law? CKU. Henry nearly flipped the table on the spot. "Who the fuck do you think you are? Aren't you still bearing the Turner family's name when you come out of the house and put on an act? Who do you think you'll be if you leave the Turner family? Who I am isn't up to you, a son of a B***, to tell me. Do it if you have the guts. If I was out, then I'm no longer a Law." Eric scoffed and said disdainfully, "How childish." With that said, Eric turned his head and said to Jasper, without even glancing at the fuming Henry, "Are you the one who wants to snatch the Olympic celebration banquet from me? What's the matter? Do you feel like you're living too comfortably and are looking for excitement?" Jasper chuckled and said calmly, "I don't know whether it's excitement or not. I only heard a mad dog barking nonstop. Henry instantly perked up. He taunted Eric, whose face took on an unsightly expression. He's talking about you. As a dog that can only bark, why don't you bark a few more times for us to hear? There was a flash of dark gloom in Eric's eyes. He sneered and said, "It seems that there really are people who look down on the Turner family, yeah?" Jasper said indifferently, "So what if it's the Turner family? Has this dinner party been written down in a contract and given to the Turner family?" Eric was taken aback when he heard this. In Swallow Capital, all the Turner family had to do was give a notice about any project that the family had an eye on, and no one would dare to make them look bad. Even more so, no one would fearlessly try to snatch the project away from them. As such, how could there be a contract signed beforehand? That was why Jasper's words had truly touched a weak point. Eric turned his head to look at Hendrik. The former put on a false smile and said, "Young master of the Coombe family, how about we hurry up and draw up a contract?" When Hendrik heard what Jasper said before, he was already nervous. He knew that Jasper could definitely see through his tricks, but he did not expect Jasper to strike back so soon. The words that he so casually mentioned had placed him in a difficult position. Hendrik smiled and replied to Eric, "Mr. Turner, let's take it easy. Didn't I call both parties over so that everyone could take a seat and discuss a solution together?" Eric slammed the table and said coldly, "Stop ting me. Coombe, do you take others for fools? I know you're planning not to offend either one of us and have the two of us fight it out before signing the contract with the winner. You won't have anything to lose this way. Are you trying to get smart with me?" Hendrik looked calm, but he was extremely tormented on the inside. Eric's words had driven him into a corner. However, the one who instigated everything was Jasper. Sure enough, one should not look down on people and treat others as fools. Sooner or later, one would be fooled as well. Hendrik was somewhat regretful. He could not afford to offend either Eric or Jasper. This was initially a game of sitting and watching in safety whilst the two of them fought, then reaping the rewards when one of them won. One misstep, and he had drawn the fire upon himself. He had basically tied a noose around his own neck. Just when Hendrik was about to break out in a cold sweat, Eric suddenly laughed. The latter stared at Jasper and spoke insidiously. "Lane, I have a habit, and that's regardless if I want it or not. No one else can take away whatever I have my eye on. However, since you want to take it away, that means you're the enemy." As he spoke, Eric stretched out his index finger and pointed at Jasper. "It's been a while since someone dares to snatch something from me in Swallow Capital. Coombe is nothing good, but maybe you're nothing at all." Jasper looked at Eric plainly and said calmly, "So what if I want to take it?" Eric laughed out loud upon hearing this. He then stared at Jasper ferociously. "Then you should go to hell. The Turner family is not comparable to these pieces of trash like the Combs. If you offend me, I can make you suffer a pain worse than death." Henry clicked his tongue and sneered. "If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that you're the king. How arrogant of you. Don't be all bark and no bite. What do you want to do? Come on. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Eric gave Henry an insidious look. The former then stood up and said, "Sure. Come on, let's see who'll chicken out in the end. Mr. Lane, you've recently acquired Easy Media, yes? Consider it my defeat if your company is still in business tomorrow. Also, Coombe, you played me for a fool. Just you wait. I won't let you off the hook either." Eric smashed the cup and stormed out after he said that. The atmosphere in the room fell into an unprecedented silence. After a long while, Jasper looked at Hendrik, who wore a gloomy expression. The former chuckled and said, "Do you know what it's meant by tying a noose around your own neck, Mr. Coombe?" Hendrik gritted his teeth and said nothing. Jacob could not help but say, "Don't be so pleased. Eric won't let you off the hook now. Let's just see what will happen to you." Jasper chuckled and said, "I've offended all kinds of people since my debut. There aren't over 100 of them in total, but there are at least 80 of them. Eric is not the first nor the last, let alone the strongest. I have a solution to my grievances with him, but the Coombe family is done for." After saying this, Jasper got up and turned around to leave. Henry also stood up and spat on the father and sons who were wearing unsightly expressions. "You three idiots, are mental handicaps also inherited? Scheming when you're so incompetent yourselves? Do you think of yourselves as Napoleon? What a joke. Just wait for your deaths. Jasper asked Henry with a deep expression as they exited Shallow Grass Hall. How much do you know about this Turner family? Henry's expression was ugly as he said, they're difficult to deal with. The power of the old master and their family is no less than my grandfather's. There's this one thing he said that isn't wrong. The main power of our law family resides in Harbor City. In Swallow Capital, however, the Turner family can be said to be the stronger family. There are a total of 3 generations in the Turner family now, and Eric Turner is the most brilliant of the 3rd generation. They've been involved in business and politics since the 2nd generation, basically combining the two. The Turner family is very strong, especially in terms of capital. You know of Empire Bank, yes? Their family is their 2nd largest shareholder. Not to mention that the largest local media company in Swallow Capital, Motley Media, is also owned by the Turners. Eric Turner is primarily in charge of it. After reaching this point, Henry frowned and said, the strength of their family is inviolable. Motley Media is a listed company and its market value is less than $2 billion. But it was handed over to Eric to manage. On the one hand, Eric has the capability. On the other hand, it also shows that the Turner family's capital is solid. Motley Media, Empire Bank. Jasper frowned. Motley Media was nothing, but being the 2nd largest shareholder of Empire Bank, this meant something. The banking industry had always been an exclusive industry for those with large capitals. Ordinary people simply could not engage in it. Thinking of the rumors involving the 2 companies from his previous life, Jasper suddenly asked, does the Turner family still have a holding corporation? Henry was surprised. How did you know? Few people know about this. I only heard some news of it when my dad talked to me about it before. Navy Capital Holdings Group belongs to them. This Navy Capital Holdings Group is very low profile. Even within the same industry, not many people have heard of it, but their capabilities are simply outrageous. The group is involved in high-end industries such as insurance, banking, and securities. They only engage in these big businesses. Jasper exhaled and said, this explains it. What's the explanation? What did you think of? Henry asked curiously. Jasper said with a smile, it's nothing. I'm thinking of a way to deal with Eric, and now I have an idea. Since Motley Media is a listed company, it's easy to deal with. It won't be a big deal since the market value is around $2 billion or more. Henry heard this and frowned, saying, Motley Media may be nothing, but this is the Turner family's property. If you move against Motley Media, the Turners can mobilize huge funds to support it at any time. In the end, the ones who may fall into the pit may be us. A family like the Turners won't get into a full-scale war with us over trivial matters, Jasper said indifferently. And if they really do that, Jasper's voice was lowered as he clenched his fist lightly. His tone was gentle but forceful as he said, I can raise at least $10 billion in a week. If that doesn't work, we'll go to Harbor City. I'm confident we can at least get $30 billion in capital. With more than $40 billion in funds in this domestic play to the industry, I have the confidence to be able to flip their table even if God is right in front of me. Henry listened till his blood surged. He could not help say, rest assured. Even if it's $50 billion, much less 30, our law family will definitely fork it out. Jasper chuckled and patted Henry's shoulder. Prosperity brought friends and adversity tested them. The law family was definitely his most steadfast ally, and Jasper knew this fact well. There's no need to be so pessimistic. Things have not reached that point. We have an ace in the hole, so we need not be afraid of the other party raining an all-out war on us. But in any case, I will definitely move against Eric's Motley Media, Jasper said lightly. Back at the hotel, Anna, who had already returned, quickly learned of the situation. Those Turners are intolerable bullies. Anna's expression was ice-cold. Do you want to go up against Eric Turner? Anna asked Jasper. Jasper nodded and said apathetically, I've never been one not to return a favor. Anna smiled and said, Good. Wait for me for a while. After saying this, Anna left to make a phone call. On the side, Henry looked on and was shocked. My little sister doesn't usually have a bone to pick with others, but when she's angered and does take action, her methods are more aggressive than anyone else's, Henry said to Jasper quietly. Puzzled, Jasper asked. From what I can see, she's not someone who starts a fight with others easily or uses underhanded means. Do you really need to be so afraid? Damn, you may think that you've seen how she does things, but you don't know that she has a really broad network. I don't know how many resources she has, but she can basically settle the issue for me whenever something happens to me. As Henry said this, he seemed to have realized that saying so would greatly affect his reputation as the big brother. He let out a dry cough before continuing. Anyway, my dad even told me before that if Anna had been born before me, or if she was a boy, then I wouldn't have stood a chance at getting the law's inheritance. I'm sure you know what this means. When they were talking, Anna came back and stared coldly at Henry. Did you say something nasty about me? Henry quickly laughed dryly and said, No, I didn't. I was praising you. Anna snorted, then walked up to Jasper and said, As Eric is involved in the media industry, he keeps close contact with those in Harbor City. I just contacted a person who was once in frequent contact with him, and he holds compromising materials on Eric, which I think will be useful to you. Henry cocked his ears when he heard what she said. He asked curiously, What compromising materials? Normal materials are useless when you're dealing with a man like that. Anna sneered. A material of him fooling around with a few ladyboys after taking drugs. Is this enough? Jasper. Henry. The usual news about corruption and bribery would have no effect at all on children from aristocratic families. However, if the news of Eric fooling around with some ladyboys after taking drugs spread to the Turner family, Eric would be done for without needing Jasper to do anything at all. Most of the time, the struggles and conflicts in a wealthy and distinguished family were particularly tragic. Even so, most of the seniors would be glad to see it happen. After all, this was just like the law of the jungle. The winner who survived the struggle would also be the strongest and the most capable of leading the family toward a glorious future. It was precisely because of this that the compromising material on Eric was enough to have him consigned to eternal damnation. Jasper looked at Anna with a bizarre expression. She has really powerful means, he thought. It only took her a few minutes to obtain such materials? Anna blushed a little, and she explained in a low voice, Actually, I don't usually do things like this. As she was saying, she looked at Jasper uneasily. She appeared afraid that she would ruin her image in Jasper's eyes. Jasper coughed to clear his throat and said slowly, I believe you. At this point in time, the esteemed and most ruthless queen of JW Consortium had exhibited her power for the first time. In the future, there would be people in JW Consortium who would be brave enough to slam the table and argue with Jasper. There would also be people who would stick to their own principles and chose not to do things for Jasper's sake. However, no one dared to offend Her Majesty in a law. No one could compare to her ruthlessness. In the blink of an eye, it was already the second day. The sun was shining brightly when Jasper received a call from a senior executive of Easy Media, saying that the company had recently made a cooperative negotiative, but their partner had breached the contract completely, causing them to suffer heavy losses. No doubt, Eric had started taking action against him through Motley Media and the Turner's powers. In response to this, Jasper gave all Easy Media employees a holiday. Now that he had a plan to deal with Eric, nothing he did would affect his plan. He would let him enjoy himself first. It was also the perfect time for the employees to take a break. Then he would reorganize. He turned on the computer in the hotel room. From this moment onward, the domestic stock market would set off another bloody storm. Following the good news of the Olympic Games, the domestic stock market thrived during this period with the stocks booming. Jasper pulled out Motley Media stocks and studied the short-term trend carefully, realizing that there were obvious signs of a dealer in Motley Media stocks. This dealer was different from the traditional dealers who would buy stocks at a low price and then raise the price and pull out. This dealer in Motley Media was probably a long-term one. He was constantly absorbing the retailer's stocks. Seemingly afraid of being discovered, this was all done in an extremely subtle manner. Hence, there was no major stir in the market. As time went by, Motley Media's stock price would gradually rise. The stock investors had not noticed it yet because the dealer's movement was extremely subtle and done with enough patience. When the stock investors finally realized the decreasing circulating stocks and increasing stock prices, that was when Motley Media would surge into a hot stock. After living 2 lifetimes and accumulating more than 40 years of experience in the stock market, Jasper knew that this dealer could only be one person. The Turners themselves were speculating this stock. It was strictly forbidden for shareholders to speculate their own company's stocks. Without hesitating, Jasper transferred $1 billion in funds into his security account, and he began to buy the retailer's stocks at a lower price. Unlike other dealers that moved stealthily, Jasper placed a large buy order directly. The entire tape of more than $2 billion surged up a bar after Jasper threw in a big order. At the same time, Jasper gave a call to Jake Cullen, who was far away in Harbor City, and ordered him to enter the market with his traders at the same time. Not only that, Henry, who had been displeased with Eric a long time ago, joined in as well. However, to avoid the spread of this impact, Henry did not involve a loss. Instead, he used his own network to build a team of traders with his own money and began buying Motley Media's shares. All 3 parties attacked in unison, and Motley Media's stock price soared. In just half an hour, the dealers noticed something amiss and began to increase their efforts to acquire more stocks. Unfortunately, they were too slow. Motley Media's stock price had hit the limit up before they could acquire any stocks. That's the end of today's battle. Jasper shut his computer, turned around to take a cup of hot tea that Anna made him, and thanked her with a smile. Henry was a bit displeased. Why is there even a darn limit up setting? We still need to wait several more days before we can buy enough stocks. Jasper laughed and said, when 2 armies confront each other, they pay attention to pre-planning and the mobilization of resources. A few months is simply not enough for preparation. This is already considered fast enough. Henry curled his lips and stood up, saying, I'm going to participate in a meeting about the construction of Olympic Village and several other venues today. Basically, it's just to discuss with the higher-ups each of our opinions for reference. Jasper said, hold on. While talking, Jasper took out a folder and handed it to Henry. He said, take this with you. I pulled an all-nighter for this. It'll probably help you in your meeting. Henry opened the folder curiously, and after taking a few glances, his eyes widened. Although Henry did not understand architectural design, he, who grew up in the law family, knew more things than most people. He could tell at one glance if a design was good or bad. At the sight of the document that was in his hand at the moment, Henry could feel his scalp tingling. Chapter 325. Aquatic Center. Honeycomb Stadium. You designed these yourself? Henry said, looking at Jasper in astonishment. Anna grew interested when she saw this and walked over to take a look. She had a background in fashion design, and although it was a completely different concept from architectural design, she understood how this worked by analogy. Anna was relatively better and more professional at visual perception than Henry. She could tell at a glance that this was the most creative design ever. Not only did it carry a profound significance that many people in the country cared a lot about, but it was also a stroke of genius design in terms of aesthetics. This document is worth a lot of money, Anna exclaimed. Jasper smiled and said, I guess you can say that I had a sudden burst of inspiration. This is just my suggestion. I have no idea whether this architectural design can be realized, nor do I know anything about the specific design. We will need professionals for it. Henry said excitedly, I'm quite confident now that I have this document. I'll show this document to my dad later. By the way, I told my dad about you last night, and he said that he'll come to Swallow Capital to discuss this with you. He wants to invite you to become a shareholder so that we can make a fortune together. As Henry spoke, he looked rather troubled, saying, I thought our family will be the one to help you make a fortune this time. But with this document, I have a feeling that you're the one helping our family instead. Jasper smiled and said, without the law's resources, JW is far from qualified to participate in such a major project domestically. I call this mutual benefit. Jasper was not trying to sound polite either. Without the laws, it would have been really difficult for him to have a finger in every pie. It was a good thing that the laws were willing to bring him along. In business, apart from mutual friendship, profit was the most fundamental. Being a freeloader once or twice was fine, but as time went by, it might not necessarily be good for the relationship between both parties. In Jasper's case, This document's creativity that was adopted from the future had placed him in a win-win situation no matter who he worked with. And this was what made Jasper so valuable. When both parties' values were evident, only then would their cooperation be lasting and loyal. When Henry got the document, he was really excited to carry his family's huge burden. He walked out of the hotel to attend the meeting without stopping to rest. Anna invited Jasper out for a walk as well. Of course, Jasper did not refuse. The two walked downstairs while talking and laughing. As soon as they walked to the hotel lobby, Jasper saw Eric sitting cross-legged while looking at him with a smug expression on his face. From the look on his face, anyone could tell that he was intentionally waiting there for him. Hey, I was wondering why Henry is so close to you. It turns out that you've moved in with the laws. Boy toy, Eric said in a lukewarm tone, looking at Anna's face as she smiled like a blooming flower. While standing next to Jasper, a touch of jealousy and greed flashed in his eyes. As Eric spoke, he stood up and put his hands in his pockets. He walked over sullenly. Do you know how powerful I am now, kid? If I say that your company will go bankrupt, it'll go bankrupt. All of Easy Media's deals have fallen through, right? Haha, this is only the first wave. Eric was both triumphant and arrogant. Next, relevant departments will investigate your company. If they find something illegal, then you'll have to face the consequences. It's not too late to beg for mercy. Why don't you get down on your knees and bark like a dog? If I'm happy with your barking, I might consider letting you off. Eric leaned over slightly, moved his annoying face toward Jasper, and said sarcastically, Are you mad? That's how powerful I am. No one can save you even if you die of anger. Ha! Facing Eric's aggressiveness, Jasper stepped back slightly while furrowing his brows. He looked a little disgusted. He even pulled Anna with him. It was like he had bumped into a stinky beggar on the streets, afraid that he would get choked by the pungent smell. Jasper's actions triggered Eric. What do you mean by that? What do you think I am? A beggar or a bug? Eric said sullenly. Jasper said mildly, Looks like we're on the same page. Otherwise, why would you say words such as beggars and bugs? Anna could not help but laugh. Eric's gaze grew darker and colder. This was how it was with men's conflicts. When a woman was involved, the conflict between both men would intensify manyfold. Besides, Eric hated Jasper's guts. At this moment, Eric felt that Jasper had trampled on his dignity. He was very upset. He clearly had the upper hand. He had even taken the initiative to come up to taunt Jasper, so Jasper should be the one to get mad instead. What are you so proud of? You must be hopping mad inside, but you're pretending to look calm. Huh? Eric sneered and said, When Easy Media is destroyed, I'd like to see how you're going to keep pretending. Anna looked at Eric indifferently and said, We don't even know who will win yet. Why are you so eager to show off? Eric glanced at Anna, and for some reason, Eric would put away his vicious and arrogant aura when facing her. He was afraid that he would seem too presumptuous. However, this was something he had never felt before when he faced Henry. It was clear that Eric was more apprehensive of Anna than Henry. Anna, this is between Jasper and me. It has nothing to do with you, Eric said in a deep voice. Anna said coldly, Jasper is the law's ally. If you lay a finger on him, you're laying a finger on the laws. Who are you to say that this has nothing to do with me? Eric's complexion changed slightly when he heard what she said. He pointed at Jasper and said, He's just a boy toy now? You must be out of your mind. Anna, you can get all sorts of men with your family background and appearance. Why choose this idiot? Anna's expression sank as she said coldly, Watch your mouth. Eric Turner, you'd better clean that mouth of yours. Eric's face was as black as ink as he gritted his teeth, feeling wronged as resentment bubbled within him. He could not believe that he was swallowing his anger like that, so afraid to even irritate Anna at this moment. At the sight of this, Jasper could not help but look at Anna in a new light. After all, she had always been meek and obedient in front of him. What earth-shattering things had this woman done before he met her? She had her big brother completely wrapped around her little finger. Now, even Eric, a fearless trust fund baby, revered her. At this point, Eric's phone rang. Eric quickly connected the call to get himself out of the embarrassing situation. The person on the other end said something, and Eric's expression started sinking at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. After a while, Eric hung up and looked at Jasper coldly. "You're acquiring Motley Media's stocks?" Jasper said mildly. "I thought you received the news a long time ago. Are you only receiving the news now? Looks like things aren't going so well for Motley Media's chairman." Eric gritted his teeth. Indeed, although he was Motley Media's president, there were many people in the Turner family who were unhappy about this and often set up obstacles to hinder him. This was such an important matter, yet he was only informed about it now. Clearly, someone had put obstacles in his way. Eric said with an ice-cold face, "How dare you attack Motley Media, Jasper Lane? You must have a death wish." Jasper said insipidly, "You should have thought of this when you attacked Easy Media. I was just taking necessary countermeasures." "What's wrong? Only you can fight me, and I'm not allowed to fight back? I didn't know this logic exists." Eric was so furious, he burst out laughing. "Do you think you're capable of fighting back? You can't even recognize what's good for you. You're simply seeking your own doom. How many people gave up resisting and knelt down to beg for mercy when they found out that I'm going to deal with them? Who the F***CK do you think you are, Jasper? How dare you fight back?" Jasper looked at Eric coldly and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm an unyielding man, so it's impossible for me not to fight back." Eric flashed a sinister smile and raised his hand, pointing at Jasper while saying, "Okay, an unyielding man? Huh? Sure. Let's see who will be the last man standing." After saying these words, Eric turned around and left with a gloomy expression. He was vigilant about the sudden jump in Motley Media's stock price, but never would have thought that Jasper would be so bold to touch Motley Media. He did so with such decisiveness, too. It seemed like he needed to go back as soon as possible to deal with this matter. In addition to that, he must punish Jasper for his arrogance. After walking out of the hotel's entrance, Eric's eyes shifted, and he made a call immediately. "It's me, Eric. I heard that Jasper is really close to Jim Yap." "Yes. Teach Jim a lesson and let him know that he will face very serious consequences for following the wrong person." When Anna saw Eric leaving in a rage, she said to Jasper, "This person is an extremist. He could do anything. He won't let this matter drop so easily." Jasper said nonchalantly, "What can he possibly do? Does he think he can shut the domestic stock market down after what happened there? He can't stop this from happening. If he uses other means to deal with us, then we'll just endure it. When we have enough stocks in hand after a few days, that's when it'll be his doom." Anna nodded in agreement. In the evening, Jim was driving to the entrance of a reputable high school while humming. It was his son's birthday today, and he and his wife had decided to host a celebration for him. In addition to that, Jasper had helped him tremendously during this period of time. He had successfully acquired George Powell's consulting company. With his company's smooth development, business was booming. Everything was moving in the right direction. Therefore, Jim was in a good mood. He was wondering if he should invite Jasper over tonight as well, so that his family could thank him themselves. At the thought of this, he asked his wife, who was sitting at the front passenger seat and holding a cake, to keep an eye on the entrance of the school while he gave Jasper a call. As soon as the call was connected, several burly men suddenly surrounded the car from all sides. Before Jim knew what was happening, both car doors were opened, and he heard his wife yelp. Anxious, Jim tossed his phone aside, and before he could say anything to those men, the clubs they held in their hands started raining down on the couple. In a shopping mall on the other side of Swallow Capital, Jasper listened to the commotion coming from the phone. He heard the cursing and yelling of strangers as well as Jim's screams. Jim is in trouble. Jasper stood up abruptly, anger coursing through his veins. It was in the hospital when Jasper saw Jim again. Covered in blood, Jim was lying weakly on the hospital bed. He had just regained consciousness after receiving emergency treatment. When he opened his eyes and saw Jasper, Jim asked hastily, "Jasper, my wife?" Jasper pressed Jim down and said, "Don't worry, she's fine. Her injuries are less severe than yours. They're just superficial wounds. The doctors are treating her wounds as we speak." Jim breathed a sigh of relief. "Dad!" A teenager squeezed through the crowd and walked over while choking with sobs. Jim consoled his son and said, "I'm okay." Jim spoke to his son for a while before sending him out to check on his mother. He then turned around to say to Jasper, "I'm sorry you had to make this trip, Jasper." Jasper said, "I should be the one feeling sorry. You're in trouble because of me. I didn't know where you were, but someone called the cops in the end. It was only after the hospital called me that I rushed over." Jim sighed and said, "I was about to pick up my son from school today and planned to invite you over for dinner. I didn't expect this to happen. It's the Combs, huh?" Jasper did not intend to tell Jim about the Turners lest he felt more pressured. "It's not the Combs. I'll take care of this for you. They won't give you trouble anymore." Jim said to Jasper seriously, "I think these people are trying to warn you. That's why they attacked me. These people can do anything. You must be careful." When Jasper saw how sensible Jim was, he said earnestly, "I'll pay attention to that. The doctor said you need to be hospitalized. So while you're recuperating in the hospital, I'll ask Julian to take your son to school and pick him up after." Jim said in a hurry, "No, they aren't bold enough to attack a child. That's just plain cruel. Julian needs to protect you because you're the one who is in most danger right now." Jasper said seriously, "I have my own means. Don't worry about it." "Oh, what sort of means? Let's hear them." A grating voice was heard. The door of the ward was pushed open, and Eric walked in grinning from ear to ear as he stared at Jim, who lay on the bed with gauze and bandages wrapped all over him. He tooted. "Tsk, look how pitiful you look. You must be Jim, right? Does it hurt?" "Ha ha ha." Jasper stood up and looked at Eric, saying, "You're more shameless than I thought." Eric roared with laughter and asked, "Are you angry?" As he said that, Eric moved closer, looking carefully at Jasper and saying in surprise, "Are you really angry? Then it's really worth it. I did so many things and even came over in person just to see the angry look on your face." As Eric spoke, he laughed and said smugly, "The angry and helpless look on your face just makes me so king happy. Do you really think you're capable of making me mad?" Despite Jasper's calm tone, his aura revealed that a storm was brewing. Eric sneered. He was filled with contempt and disdain as he said, "I feel sick when I look at your pretentious face. I'm pissing you off on purpose. What can you do?" Eric patted the hospital bed and sneered. "This is just a warning, kid. You'd better keep this in mind and be smart. Close position for all the motley media stocks you acquire today. Otherwise, no one knows who will be the next one lying on the hospital bed next time." Jasper said in a lukewarm tone, "Is that why you're here? Just to tell me to sell off motley media stocks?" Eric said sullenly, "What else? Of course, I'm also just dropping by to see you tremble in fear." Jasper smiled lightly. "Well, I'm not trembling in fear. You must be really disappointed." "Huh? Oh, right. There's even more disappointing news for you. I won't sell off motley media stocks and will instead increase acquisition." Eric's complexion darkened gradually. "So you're going to fight me to the end? Huh?" Jasper pointed at Jim, who was on the hospital bed with an edge in his gaze. "You'll pay for his and his family's injuries sooner or later." "Idiot!" Eric sneered. "Who the hell do you think you are? Since I've done it, that means I'm not afraid of your so-called retaliation. Since you insist on fighting with me, sure, bring it on then. Don't think I won't touch you just because you bought some King stocks of Motley Media. I won't hesitate to end you." Jasper looked at Eric coldly. "I'll be waiting for you to make a move then." With a sneer, Eric said, "Let's hope you can still act so pompously in front of me the next time we meet." At this moment, Jasper's phone rang. It was a call from Anna. "I've contacted several friends. Several domestic brokers who hold Motley Media stocks have agreed to transfer the stocks to us at about 15% premium, which will cost about $60 million in total." Jasper said calmly, "Take it. I'll transfer the money to your account later. Make the deal as soon as possible." Anna said softly, "Okay, I'll get it done soon." "Thanks," Jasper said. Anna chuckled and hung up. Eric stared at Jasper coldly. His instincts told him that the call Jasper received had something to do with him. "Whose call was that? What did you do this time?" Eric asked sullenly. Jasper shrugged and said mildly, "Nothing. I just bought some shares of Motley Media from a few big brokers. My acquisition speed was too slow, so it would be easier if I acquired their stocks directly." "Jasper, you have a King death wish," Eric roared. Eric was eager to end Jasper's life right now. He was clearly at an advantage every time he came to Jasper. He would try to mock Jasper and then admire the exasperated look on his face, so the man would regret going against him. Toward the end, however, he would always be the one who ends up suffering a crushing defeat. He had indeed gotten an exasperated reaction out of someone, but that someone was him instead. He had been warned by the elders in the family today because of the unusual jump in Motley Media stocks. If news that Jasper had acquired Motley Media stocks from these brokers spread out, his family would no doubt be skeptical of his ability to continue leading Motley Media. Eric never would have expected Jasper to act so quickly and decisively, going straight to the brokers to acquire stocks. One must know that those brokers were blood-sucking vampires who would ask for more than 10% or 20% premium, or they would not sell their stocks. However, facts had proven that Jasper did buy them. Are you crazy? Do you have too much money with nowhere to spend? Why are you spending several $100 million to acquire Motley Media stocks just to hammer the market? Is it really necessary to cause destruction for the both of us, in which you'll have to suffer heavy losses as well? Eric stared ferociously at Jasper and raged. Jasper smiled and said slowly, "Is several $100 million a lot? Will the young master of the Turner family even care about the loss of hundreds of millions? Well, I certainly don't. There are always ways to earn money, but not many opportunities to watch the fascinating expressions on young Master Turner's face." Eric gasped, feeling a malicious fire surging from the pit of his stomach. It made him feel so uncomfortable that it was like he was being pricked by needles. If he could, he would certainly choke Jasper to death right now. He had never loathed a person this much. "Jasper, nothing good will come out of this for you. Why don't we each take a step back?" A flame of humiliation flickered in Eric's eyes. In his opinion, he had saved Jasper's dignity big time by saying those words. Each take a step back. Jasper smiled and pointed at Jim, who was lying on the hospital bed. He said, "Sure, why don't you pay back the injuries you inflicted upon him inch by inch? And when you're done paying them all back, I'll then discuss with you how we can both take a step back." Eric clenched his fist tightly, staring coldly at Jasper with a sharp gaze. "You really want to have a life and death struggle with me? Huh? If all else fails, I'll just go back and admit my mistakes, then use the Turner's resources. When the time comes, you won't be able to end this even if you want to." "Eric," Jasper said lightly, "I'm afraid that you still don't understand. From the moment you sent someone to beat Jim up, the fight between us had already begun." Eric did not say any more. He glanced coldly at Jasper, then turned around and left. In the ward, Jasper watched calmly as Eric left the ward, his eyes as cold as an iceberg. "Who is he, Jasper?" Jim finally asked. Jasper gave Jim a reassuring smile, saying, "The mastermind behind all this, but it's fine now. I have ways to deal with him. I'm sorry for dragging you down with me." Jim shook his head and said, "I'm not afraid, but you, Jasper, have to protect yourself. These people will do anything." Jasper smiled and said, "I know my limits." When Jasper returned to the hotel, Henry was seen boasting to Anna about his extraordinary achievements in the meeting today and how great of an achievement he had made. The magnate that presided over the meeting praised me 3 times in a row for the excellent plan I gave them and said that he'll give careful considerations for it. Other families and all those idiots in the company are just a bunch of dumb geese. Oh, that was so incredibly cool. Ha ha. As she drank her juice, Anna frowned at Henry, who was standing in the center of the living room, blabbering away. She said, "You're blocking the TV." Henry walked away, cursing and scolding. Anna glanced at him with a lukewarm gaze and said, "You only got the chance to be in the limelight because of the creative design Jasper gave you. You must remember his kindness." Henry said enviously, "Oh, enough, sis. If we both fart, then my fart will always be the smelly one while Jasper's will be the fragrant one." Anna frowned and criticized him. How vulgar. After thinking for a while, she said again, "You're right, though." Henry nearly vomited blood out of anger. Jasper came back at the right time, and Henry ran over with a serious expression. "I heard that the idiot Eric came again today." Jasper nodded and roughly told him what had happened. Henry roared with anger. "F***ck. He's so arrogant." Should I get some men to put him in a sack and toss him into the sea? Jasper was caught between laughter and tears. You look pretty skilled. You must have used this method many times before? Huh. For the first time ever, Henry was honest. I've used it many times indeed, and it works every time. Jasper waved his hand and said, "This is an underhanded trick used by kids and is better kept under the table. It's no fun, and they'll also have something to use against you. The Turner sickens me. They turned up at the meeting today as well. Damn, they're all the same, arrogant as if they're kings themselves. Like us, they're also trying to snatch the Olympic Village project," Henry said with a sullen expression. "They won't be able to snatch it away," Jasper said lightly. Since learning about the Olympic Village project, Jasper had regarded this as something that was in his grasp. He would never let anyone touch it. This was related to his business topology, so even if a much higher-level force came into the picture, Jasper would not give in to them, let alone the Turners. In one of the villas in Swallow Capital, Eric slammed the wine glass in his hand down. The more he thought about it, the more upset he was. He walked back and forth with his hands behind his back and suddenly took out his phone. "It's me, Eric. How can I help, Mr. Turner?" On the other end of the phone, a senior executive of Motley Media was heard saying reverently. This person was also Eric's trustworthy confidant. "There's an unusual jump in the company's stock price today, and it has brought a terrible impact. Keep a close eye tomorrow. If the other party continues to acquire stocks, then we will sell the shares on hand. But if he sells his stocks directly, then we will use the company's funds to take over," Eric said in a sinister voice. The senior executive said hesitantly, "Sir, taking over isn't the main issue here. It's illegal for the other party to buy and for us to sell. If the Securities Regulatory Commission catches us, then we will be in big trouble." Eric roared furiously, "This is my decision. I'm informing you, not discussing it with you. I, the chairman, am responsible for the consequences. So what are you afraid of? Have you forgotten that I'm a Turner, who will have the audacity to control me?